Hey everybody, welcome to the Pro Wrestling Musings podcast. Open the pod bay doors, Hal. It's time for AEW Wrestling. I am Griff from GA. Right over there, that is Sergi from PWM. And down there, you can't see him, but you can certainly see his picture. That is Ibu, otherwise known as Hangman Adam Pierce, over on Twitter. We got a lot of AEW to talk about, lots of great stuff. But we will begin today with, of course, the biggest story coming out of AEW this week, and that is the return of Hangman Adam Page in the Casino ladder match. This one obviously had social media just absolutely rocking, but I think there's a lot more to talk about than just people being happy that Hangman is back. The first thing that I want to say, though, I think that it's a new kind of surprise, because this is one where usually AEW they make special reference to the Joker, right? Whether it's in the Casino ladder match or a battle royal or anything like that, they say, we have this Joker, the Joker could be anyone, and they usually make sure you know that that's what the deal is. But this one, they mentioned it, there was like a week of build for the ladder match. The most build we ever got was an announcement at the very end of Rampage of two of the competitors, and they almost, I don't think they ever once said, oh, keep an eye out for the Joker. So this seemed very subdued, and yet this was one of those times where the Joker, it was one of the most important Jokers that we've seen in a battle royal to date. And, you know, considering that the last few Jokers of these casino style things, besides Ruby Soho, have been like Leo Rush and Matt Sydal. Like, no disrespect to those guys, but this is definitely a bigger deal than them. So, Sergi, I mean, when Hangman's music hit, was this something that you were expecting to see? I mean, did you almost get a sense that maybe this was the direction they were going in, or did you think they were going to kind of play it safe with this one?
Oh, you know, it was definitely a case of I was doubtful that they really were going to go in this direction. I had a lot of reasons, like, oh, you know, there's no need to plug him in now. Isn't this a match to set up just a one-off opponent for Omega, and you know, et cetera, et cetera. But once his music hit, it's like, you know, it doesn't matter. It's like, oh, well, if they are going in this direction, that changes everything. If this is the direction they're choosing, then I'm all here for it. That's awesome. I'm so glad to see him back. You know, that was the other thing. It's like everyone, all the people who were saying it's definitely Hangman. It's like, well, how do you know that he's even ready to come back?
Right.
We don't know his personal life, but now that we see that, yes, he was ready to come back and that this is the time, absolutely, I'm all on board for it. My only question is, now we're hearing about a tournament to choose the Omega's opponent for All Out. It's like, all right, well, wait. When's Hangman challenging then? I'm very confused about where they're going with this, but we've got that trust.
Somebody clarified that for me on Twitter, because I was totally confused too. Like, I was watching Rampage and then they said something about the Eliminator tournament and concluding in Full Gear, and I was like, wait, what? Because Hangman just won the poker chip. But someone clarified it's just what they did last year, where they're gonna have a title match on the show, and at the same time, the finals of the tournament will be at the show, and whoever wins that will likely get the title shot against the winner of the title match at a later date. So, like, if you remember last year.
No, I get it, Abu. Thank you. As soon as you said concluded at, I was like, the finals of that tournament are at All Out. It's not to choose the challenger for All Out. I get you now.
Full Gear. Yeah, Full Gear.
Or Full Gear. Forgetting which pay-per-view is next.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I was totally, like, I was so thrown off. And then, like, I went to Twitter and I was just kind of like, huh? And then, like, 10 people came in my replies and explained it to me. So
yeah, Twitter's very generous.
You, that clarifies a lot.
Yeah, no problem, though.
So one of the things that I think is really interesting about this is, for a storyline in this Hangman Omega thing, that so many people have been so confident that they knew what was going to happen, right? Everyone has been fantasy booking this thing and said, we know exactly how this story is going to go. For a storyline that's been so much of that, this to me, it was a total shock that Hangman came back, and now it's thrown the entire story completely for a loop, because I don't know if they're going to do like a triple threat. Are they going to do a three-way at Full Gear with Danielson, because Danielson is still owed a title match. Not in the same way that Hangman is, but certainly from a story perspective, it seems like he deserves a match against
on the
Kenny.
horizon for sure. Yeah,
exactly. So are they going to go that direction? Are they going to have Danielson actually in the Eliminator tournament and set him up for the first opponent of Hangman or a next opponent of Kenny after that? I mean, there's for a story that everyone was so confident in it. Now I feel like there's a lot of different directions they could go, and not all of them lead to Hangman winning the title at Full Gear, which is something interesting. I didn't think I would be saying that at this point.
I'll tell you what, man. So, the reason why it feels this way is because of the timing of his return. Because when they really kind of kickstarted the Hangman Omega thing in terms of really focusing on it as a title program in July, it really did feel like we were headed towards an August early September culmination of the whole thing with it concluding it all out, right?
Yep.
And it was seeming very set up because a lot of the loose ends regarding Omega and other storylines outside of Hangman were kind of being cleared out the way to kind of clear out a path for Hangman to directly go after him, right? But then we got the swerve where he lost the multi-man elimination tag match at Fight for the Fallen, and we went in a different direction. And since we've gone in that different direction, I feel like we've opened up a bunch of plot threads with Kenny Omega. Like he did the stuff with Christian, but now it's he's opened up this whole new thing with Bryan Danielson. And to me, when we opened the Bryan Danielson thing up, and then we went to the Arthur Ashe match that it had the finish it did. And then we booked this multi-man tag. In my mind, I'm thinking like, okay, this is mapping out Omega's September, October, and November, where he's going to be focusing more on that and probably getting a title match with Danielson at Full Gear, and presumably Hangman comes out after that. And the timing of his return makes it a bit. It throws a bit of a monkey wrench into how this whole thing's going to go. And fellow PW Musings member Gareth, he pointed out on Twitter. Gareth said that obviously everybody's super excited to see Hangman back. Like I'm sure everybody popped and went crazy over it. But what he said was it was kind of interesting. He pointed out that he thought maybe it might not have been the correct time for him to come back because of some of these loose threads in terms of like paying all this off properly. And for me, I just can't take that take, and I think it's just too premature to go in that direction. I gotta see how it happens, right? But I'll definitely say this, like I'm very curious to see how they pull this off without leaving a thread hanging, if that makes any sense. Because to me, the next time Page faces Omega, he has to win, in my opinion. But it's like if he does win, then what becomes of the teased Danielson and Omega match? Are we going to do that prior to Full Gear now? Are we going to do that on television? So that's yet to be seen. Like I got to see how they pull that off now, because like you said, there's the Danielson thing and then there's the Hangman thing, and shoot, for all we know, maybe they do a triple threat. I prefer not to, but maybe they do that. So we'll see.
Yeah, it's interesting because you've got on the one hand the Hangman Kenny story is very much an emotional journey that the fans have been on, and it's emotionally what the fans want to see, because the fans are behind Hangman, they empathize with Hangman, so that's the emotional part of the story. But from a pure match quality perspective, I think there's no doubt, as good as Hangman is, and I believe he's a really good wrestler, there's no doubt that Kenny Omega versus Bryan Danielson with a title on the line has a chance to be one of the best singles matches we've seen in the US, maybe ever, maybe in the world ever. And I don't, as much as I liked Hangman versus Omega at the finals of the Eliminator tournament last year, as much as I did like that, I don't think that they have quite the ability to be able to reach those heights. So it's kind of an interesting, do we want the emotional side of it with Hangman, or do we want the physical, incredible match side of it with Omega and Danielson? And can you do them both?
What's funny about that, Griff? Like, I think this opens up a different conversation, because it's like, sure, will Hangman Omega, can their best match beat Omega and Danielson's best match? Probably not. But people are so invested in him. Like they're so into him, and you know that's true because we've gotten the introductions since Hangman's last appearance. We've gotten CM Punk, Bryan Danielson, and Adam Cole, and yet he has not left the consciousness of AEW fans, and he's still the fans' priority number one when it comes to like coming back and facing Omega. I mean, hell, there was all this talk like when all the new signings came in, like, oh my God, is Hangman's story going to be thrown to the wayside? And no, AEW stuck to their plan. And I said on Twitter, because there was some chatter of like who the Joker is going to be, and some people said, it might be, what if it's Jay White? What if it's Will Ospreay from New Japan Pro Wrestling? And I said on Twitter, like, it's a testament to AEW and their storytelling and their stories that they built and just the way they've booked people that I'd much rather their own Hangman coming back tonight than another shock appearance from big names from New Japan. And that's how I felt about it. Like I'd rather just see the Hangman thing. And again, I guess where I'm going with this is this. It really is a battle of like just purely high level work rate versus investment. And it's like, okay, would you rather have a 4.5-star Hangman Omega match that the people are so into that they're like on the verge of tears for because they want to see their babyface, the protagonist, finally reach the mountaintop? Or do they just want to see another like really great wrestling match? Like to me, Bryan Danielson personally is the best wrestler on the planet. But even AEW fans recognize how phenomenal he is, right? Because they're wrestling fans, so they get it. But I think it's pretty safe to say he doesn't have the emotional roots with the AEW fans the way Hangman Page does, especially if you've been following the plot from the beginning. So it's one of those things, and I think I think what everybody, I can't speak for everybody, but I think a lot of AEW fans ultimately what they want to get is the emotional narrative payoff. So we'll see how Tony Khan approaches it and how he is able to satisfy both ends and satisfy just what he set up on his own on the show, without feeling like you left stones unturned.
Well, this might be the biggest challenge as a booker, not necessarily getting people over. That's hard enough. But when you have multiple people who are over, how do you satisfy everyone that wants to see all these things? So, Sergi, I'll ask you this. Do you think if they were to go, like what comes to mind for me is to let Hangman and Kenny do their thing because Danielson and Kenny is always going to be there. So let me ask you this. If we do get Bryan Danielson versus Kenny Omega and we get a finish in that match, we get a follow-up to their incredible Arthur Ashe match, would it still mean the same if the title's not there? I mean, do you think they could still reach the heights that they could if the title was on the line? And so would that then be an option to defer that match so that we can get Kenny versus Hangman? Presumably Hangman can beat him, and then that would mean we're left with Kenny Omega versus Bryan Danielson, still that great match, but without a title. Could it be as good?
Right. Well, that's an excellent question. Let me go step back a little bit first to your question before that Ibu was answered. You know how I'm often the devil's advocate, not because I like to be contrary, just because I have some contrary views. This is not one of those cases. If you have a choice between telling a compelling story or putting on a technically awesome match, always choose the story. That's my view, for sure. Not that Danielson versus Omega don't have a compelling story. They do. They have a great story of, the guy who is trying to prove that he's the best or trying to convince himself that he's the best. And then this guy from outside who's like, I know I'm the best and I'm going to prove it. It's a great story, but it doesn't have the emotional connection of, just the self-doubt and the finding himself that Hangman has gone through. This whole arc that people are really invested in. And that's why I think it's unfair to say, well, we saw Omega versus Hangman. It's like, no, that was a
chapter.
That was a middle. It was a
Yeah.
chapter, exactly. That was a middle chapter match. The climactic match is going to be a whole nother story, and I think that it's going to blow people away. I'm not saying it's going to be technically as great as Danielson versus Omega, but it's going to be great on a level, on an emotional level that
will make it special.
Well, it remains to be seen.
Right.
It will be special.
Rematches aren't always bad. You know, that's the big thing to remember. I understand that specifically WWE does them all the time and people get tired of them. That doesn't mean that it's always a bad thing when people rematch. And this is one of the cases where seeing Hangman versus Kenny
rematches
again.
are fine when they have purpose.
Right.
You know, when they have purpose and meaning and they're built well, like there's nothing wrong with going back to a matchup. The reason people criticize WWE rematches often is because there's little reason to go back to a matchup and they'll do it on TV the next week for no reason. That's why that's criticized. It's not just the very concept of doing a match again, you know, and it makes no sense to complain about seeing Omega Hangman again. Like that's what everybody wants.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, but to go back to your other question of, so assuming that we stay on plan, that Omega versus Hangman is the plan. Hangman victorious, Hangman redeemed is the plan. Assuming that that's the story that they're going to tell, and that's the assumption that we're going to go with, because I mean it just makes sense.
Yeah.
What does that mean for Danielson? Options are Danielson gets his shot before, or Danielson Omega, it happens without a title. Or actually, Danielson could still be chasing the title and his Omega match, and that could lead not to a triple threat at Full Gear, but a triple threat a month or 3 months down the line, where he's like, you know, I want to prove myself against Omega and I want the title. I think it all is pretty up in the air. I don't want to, you know. I think that Tony Khan has a plan, and I have some trust.
What if they do something where Omega's in the Eliminator tournament, and you know they play it up where like the Elite is just really, and Kenny in particular is just really afraid of taking on Danielson again, and so he gets kind of screwed over in his efforts throughout the tournament. I could see something like that where like, or not even the Elite, or what if they do something where they take him on a divergent path storyline-wise by setting up a new angle for him within the tournament and having him focus on somebody else maybe for a little bit.
Yeah, I think what they need to be careful of in this tournament, and we've talked about this before when it comes to any of these number one contenders things, when you do this, when you also have a current storyline happening for the World Championship, there's always a risk that you give away what's going to happen in that story by your choice of number one contender. Now, I don't think that's as big an issue with Hangman because of the character that he is, but I remember like when Moxley was the champion and they did this a couple times. They had an Eliminator tournament and they had a Battle Royal, and each time you're kind of thinking, at the same time Mox is having a match, they're doing this, and you're saying, okay, so if this is the opponent, then we know that Mox is going to win the match, just based on, you know, if a heel wins, Mox, the babyface champion, he's going to have to get a heel to face.
You're essentially telegraphing where it's going to a degree.
Right, and I think Danielson winning the tournament would actually be something very interesting. It would really throw a wrench into what people are expecting, and I think it works on both levels, because obviously if Kenny retains the title, then, you know, Danielson versus Kenny, like, that's going to be, you know, the match. But if Hangman wins the title, there is a compelling story. There's a compelling story there to be told with Hangman and Danielson. But instead of, like, Danielson can be the exact same character, but instead of Hangman being arrogant and everything the way Kenny is, he's grateful toward Danielson. He's, you know, gracious and everything. And it's more of a friendly-ish kind of matchup than what we're seeing between Danielson and Omega, and that would sort of give Hangman right out the gate, give him the rub of you know, being the guy who beat Bryan Danielson. So I think if it were me, just putting my fantasy booking hat on, I would have Danielson win the Eliminator tournament. If Hangman's going to win the title, have him face Hangman, and then you can get back to Danielson versus Omega. And I think, to sort of answer my own question that I asked Sergi, I think that whether you have a title or not, I think that match is going to be fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, I see where you're coming from. I definitely do feel like Omega versus Danielson, just to prove who's best, is what we already got. You know what I'm saying? Without something on the line except for bragging rights, like that was their first match. So I think that there needs to be something different on the line when they rematch, and I'm not sure how you get there. But I definitely agree with what you're saying that Danielson going into this Eliminator tournament and winning the Eliminator tournament would be an awesome anti-spoiler, kind of the opposite of what they've done in the past. Of it may give some people who might not have had any doubts that Hangman was going to win, suddenly now they have some doubts, and that can add to the drama of it in a way that's actually useful.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that.
It is very interesting what they're going to do here, because again, like I was under the assumption that Omega Danielson for the title was going to be the Full Gear match, and that in the meantime Danielson was going to just rack up wins to get up the rankings to be able to challenge. And for me, I'm kind of like trepidatious right now of a Hangman Danielson matchup for the title, because Danielson still has that like new wrestler kind of shine to him, where you would think theoretically you'd want people to still just be happy that he's here. But I mean, you put him against Hangman and he's gonna get booed, because I don't think there's anybody on the AEW roster right now that you can put against Hangman that will get cheered in favor of Hangman. And I mean, we got a piece of that when this guy John Moxley got booed in the ladder match.
I think
that's true.
I think that Moxley and Danielson are entirely different animals in this way. Moxley is on the edge of getting booed already. I think that he's on the edge of a heel turn anyway. I think that Danielson versus Hangman would definitely be a babyface versus babyface match where the fans are completely behind both of them. They don't want Danielson to win, but they're not going to boo his offense. They're going to be like just cheering everything. Instead of the yay boo spot, you'll get the yay spot, which that's always awesome when that happens. It's like, okay, people are really behind both these guys. That's cool.
I mean, that is a fair point. And just the structure of the ladder match. Like, hold on, are you guys hearing an echo? I'm getting kind of an echo from one of you guys. I'm not sure where that's coming from.
No, I'm not hearing it.
All right, no, I'm good now. But I think that is true. Like the structure of the ladder match was one where in which once Hangman's in, the fans are like, we don't want anyone to win except Hangman. We want him to get the shot. And so Moxley teasing that it could be him at that point, like they had no choice but to boo him. So it is a bit of a different situation there.
It was a lot like Rey Mysterio getting booed in the Royal Rumble way back in the day.
Oh, man.
Well, that was for a whole. That was really like directing their boos at the company, through Rey Mysterio, which is at least for the time being not something that's going to happen, I think, in AEW.
Moxley in the ladder match was very much like what Roman Reigns was in the last couple Royal Rumbles, where the one where Nakamura won and the one where Drew McIntyre won, they teased you with Roman Reigns being the victor, and so it gets the babyface over even harder when they eliminated the guy that they thought was going to win a bit. And not that Moxie is like the hated figure that Roman Reigns was at the time, but functionally it was a similar position where, he's like an establishment main event guy, and he kind of came back in a match to kind of say, all right, kid, like this is my house a little bit. And it really, really rallied the fans for Hangman, against John.
Let me qualify what I said before about Danielson. If they were to go insane and book a match where, for some reason, Hangman has to put his shot on the line against Danielson, Danielson would get booed in that situation. If Danielson was trying to take away Hangman's shot, then yes, he would get booed. But after the climax of that story, and Hangman has finally reached the mountain. If Danielson is like, okay, it's time for my shot, like you got to defend. Nobody's going to be mad at him for that. But trying to take that shot away, they'd get mad.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Speaking of Danielson, though, and speaking of just the main event scene in AEW, there's such an embarrassment of riches going on right now that AEW has, and you see that clearly in the opening match on Dynamite between the Elite, the Young Bucks, Adam Cole, and Omega, and Christian Cage, Jurassic Express, and Bryan Danielson. Now, each one of these guys, I think, can make a compelling argument for them to be, in the main event of any pay-per-view, whether as a tag team or as a singles wrestler. Obviously, Christian Cage already has been. Bryan Danielson presumably will be at some point. And Jungle Boy is, one of the young pillars of AEW. So I'm sure that, he will get his share of pay-per-view main events. But man, I mean, this match, not only did you have so much talent in it, but as a direct result, the match I thought was just phenomenal. Just I don't think anyone in the world does multi-mans as well as AEW. I really don't. I can't think of anywhere else.
Specifically in a tag setting, absolutely. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, multi-man tags. Yeah, they're great at those.
This match, it was interesting because, again, you want to really put over the fact that the Elite is in trouble. Like, Kenny Omega has looked infallible at times, but the Elite as a whole are starting to kind of wane in a sense, and you can really get a sense of that when you see the numbers on this, because you have the baby faces with 67% of the match offense, which is not usually something you see unless you're dealing with monster heels. We talked about that a lot. But in this sense, you have the baby faces just dominant. The big offense, 52-27 in favor of the baby faces. Again, just absolute insanity with these numbers. And I think the story is, the Elite is no longer infallible, and a lot of these baby faces are starting to get the better of them. And the Elite ultimately, they need to cheat to get their win, and they need to outnumber you, and they need to do all that. And you can see it with 12 fouls from the Elite, just one from the babyface. I mean, I thought this match was as good as any multi-man I have seen in AEW that I can remember just off the top of my head. Iba, what'd you think about this one?
It didn't hit me till I saw it. Like, it reminded me. So CM Punk, like a month, maybe 2 months ago, said that everybody should stop doing tope suicidas if they don't look like Darby Allin's or Rey Fenix's. And that's a good point, because like they really torpedo you, like they're legitimately trying to kill you. Mm-hmm. And like it when you see those, it really makes the more standard tope of diving and putting your arms out at the guy's shoulders like look not as good, right? Mm-hmm. And similarly here, remember the segment where Bryan was surrounded by all four members of the Super Elite, and he had to just throw elbows at every four member like it was a zombie apocalypse, them all up? Like I literally like zombies are coming at him. He has to keep holding them off. I actually just rewatched that, and it's like, man, if you don't throw an elbow like Bryan Danielson, I don't want to see your elbow, and I don't want to see your forearm either. Like it's crazy how he does it in a way where it looks devastating. But he's not actually elbowing you in a way where it's going to concuss you or anything like that. Mm-hmm. I mean, maybe he is. I don't know. Who knows? Like he is he is in savage mode. Maybe he is. But like his elbows are great. The finish was pretty good. The one unfortunate thing was the botch, obviously. Yeah. But I did think that they recovered well, like because the Elite, they kind of just hammed it up, like, oh, okay, we botched, LOL, and they kind of played into it a little bit, because they knew the fans were going to give them shit for it. Right.
Well, speaking of Jungle Boy from earlier, Jungle Boy, the fact that he got back into the ring, like they covered for it so well that halfway through the finish, I was like, was that actually a botch, or did they mean to do that? Like it was, I know it was a botch, but the way that they played it off and the way Jungle Boy got back in the ring, like again, you understand that all these guys, the Elite, we know are so knowledgeable, they're so intelligent. But to see even Jungle Boy, at his age and with only 2 years wrestling at this level, being able to start doing making those calculations, doing those things so quickly that you can cover up for even something like that. I think, one, it shows you how good Jungle Boy is, but I think it also shows you how important it is that you have so many great veterans like the Elite in AEW, because the only reason Jungle Boy can do something like that is you get guys like the Young Bucks and Adam Cole and Kenny Omega, who between them have decades of wrestling experience at the highest level, teaching him those kinds of things and ways to look at matches and allowing him to focus on the little things as opposed to worrying about having to carry a match on his shoulders the way he would have had to do before he got to AEW.
For sure. Really, I only have one complaint about this whole deal, and it has nothing to do with the wrestling. It's just, they skipped the entrances for the match, and they did it. They did it on social media at like 7:55, and I understand they did that so that there can be more time for like just the in-ring wrestling. Yeah. But just personally, I think that entrances go such a long way in just making someone look like a star in terms of just presenting them. And just seeing the big entrance and the pyro and the pop that comes with the entrance and everything. Again, it's such a big contributor to somebody feeling big time, a show feeling big time, and getting jazzed up for the match. And so for me, I could sacrifice 4 minutes of extra moves to just see people come out and do their stuff, especially since the Elite, they could do a group entrance if they want to, so you can save time there. Yeah. So I would have preferred getting the entrances rather than just starting with them in the ring. It's actually one of the things AEW does sometimes that is a bit of a pet peeve of mine. But in terms of the wrestling, I mean, like it was mostly top-notch stuff. It was a really, really great TV multi-man.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying about the entrances. I agree. The entrances are one of my favorite parts of wrestling.
Yeah.
So I'm with you there. But they tried to make up for it by giving everyone a spot, that people would cheer for. And obviously for Adam Cole, he got 2 of them because they did the super click spot where the Bucks
and the other one where he did his catchphrase. Yeah,
that one I loved because everyone had
dove. Was fantastic.
And Omega had done his Terminator dive, by the way, which for me, he had stopped doing that a lot during his title reign, and whether that was because of the injuries or because of the idea that heels shouldn't do high spots that would make people cheer for him. Whatever the case is, he stopped doing it. He did it once against Danielson in that match. And now he does it again here. And so to me, the fact that he's doing that, I'm like, oh, okay, so, this is something special. Like Jungle Boy dives all the time. The Bucks dive all the time. But Omega doing the Terminator dive, he doesn't do that all the time. So when I see Cole getting ready to run, I'm like, oh, Cole never dives. Like, oh, this is going to happen. And then he does it. He does the Adam Cole Bebe thing, and everyone goes nuts. And his facial expression, like he was so impressed with himself that's what he came up with. In that moment.
Adam Cole's great.
Man. I love Adam Cole. I love Adam Cole.
Yeah.
So Sergi, just looking at the graph of this match as well. I mean, this is you're our resident, story expert. We'll call you among many other things. You wear lots of hats. You wear lots of hats at PWM. But for our purposes here, I want to talk about the story of this match. Looking at the graph, the babyfaces were in control for a huge majority of this match, and it's interesting because I'm wondering what kind of story is going to come out of this long term. I mean, for me, I'm satisfied right now because it gave me a great match that I really, really enjoyed. But long term, what do you think the story is coming out of this?
Well, I mean, I feel like the Elite story all along has been one that they don't feel that they genuinely can dominate fairly, and that cheating and having more people, the numbers games, that's the term, the numbers games are something that they have to rely on. So I don't think it's too surprising that that they won without dominating. And that's kind of what they do for the most part. It's interesting if you look at, since Bryan Danielson has arrived, he has not lost any singles matches against the Elite. He has won, or in the case of Omega, not been able to be beaten. But all of the multi-man matches he's been a part of, he has not been able to win. He wasn't always a part of them, but his group, I call them the Allied Forces, that his group has had a few...
and Christian, yeah.
Exactly. They've had a few multi-man matches and they haven't won any of them. Whereas Danielson hasn't lost a singles match yet against any Elite. Well, anybody, but mainly against the Elite. This is his first non-Elite related match next week against Fish. But other than that, he's been showing that on a singles level, he is a level above them, but when they're able to bring the numbers games in, and there's so much chaos in a match like this, and I think this is a good time for me to bring in something I wanted to mention, that just how off base is Jimmy Corderas. Expecting how his idea that the refs should take control of these matches. It's like that's not the kind of match this is.
Did Corderas he was mad about like the enforcement of stuff in the tag match?
He is always mad about the poor officiating in AEW, and it was one of his opportunities to throw it out there over this match. Of all matches, everyone was very happy with this match except for Jimmy Corderas.
To be honest, though, here's the thing: so Jimmy's a former ref. I can still recognize a match is great and understand if somebody feels that maybe they should be. I don't know if the word is more stringent, but at least operate under the pretense that the ref is trying to keep the heels under control. Because here's the thing, right? The Elite, obviously, look, they come from PWG, and they're used to having matches where it's frenetic and they're getting their shit in, and they're going to be in there as long as they want to do their group moves and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And that's fine. So be it. It makes the match better. But I think it works perfectly if they're doing it, not at the behest of the ref, but almost against the ref's wishes. If you do it in a way where like the ref is trying to stop them, so to speak, or at least trying to enforce that they have a limit of time, but the heels just don't like listen, rather than like a situation where like a Rick Knox or somebody. It's usually a Rick Knox who will just kind of stand there and just let things happen. I'm not a big stickler for rules and stuff like that, but what I will say is this: when you establish rules firmly, it is a good storytelling device in wrestling because it stands out when they're broken, and it can lead to interesting situations. We've seen it in Ring of Honor where Ring of Honor did the Pure Division, and the Pure Division is all about rules, and it's about pure wrestling and doing it within the confines of the rules set up. And it's treated like a real sport. And when you do it there, when you break rules within a setting like that, you're a legitimate asshole for doing so. Because it's like you're showing total disrespect for what you're doing. It's like if you were to play a sports game and you just intentionally hard fouled somebody, right?
Yeah.
So what's up?
I was going to say that's a really good point. And I think there's a line. For me, it was early on when the Lucha Brothers were in, because they were coming from Mexico where they had been for a long time. And that to me...
There's looser rules there.
Exactly. So that was the line, because there were a lot of times where there was not, like, they didn't have a single tag during an entire match, but they were constantly moving in and out. It's like, I get it. You watch it in Mexico and it is very entertaining when they do it, but in the US it's a much different thing that US fans expect from tag wrestling. And so if AEW wants to say we have tag rules, then that, to me, the Lucha Brothers can't be doing the stuff that they did. And to their credit, they have gotten better.
Consistent. Yeah, exactly. I think you just got to be consistent within whatever rules you establish. It's like a story. Like if you read a book or something, and there's a world established and built, and then you create rules for the verse that you've created, and just be consistent to it, because otherwise then you have a plot hole. And with wrestling in AEW, whatever your rules you wanna have, like if you wanted, and they never will, but if you wanted to do like you said, in Lucha Libre promotions, there's no tags, and if that's the rule, then that's the rule, and there's no issue. You just got to be consistent.
Yeah.
So again, like I'm not gonna be like AEW does enough positive that I'm not gonna be a stickler and say that like inconsistent tag officiating is enough to ruin a product or anything like that. But at the same time, it definitely doesn't hurt to try to focus on being consistent with the officiating.
Yeah.
But
no, it's fair.
Yeah, like that's kind of how I see it. So
it's funny coming from me because I come from a background of being a fan of sports, and and so in about 3 hours from when we're recording this, you can catch me in front of my TV probably complaining about officiating in a football game. Right, and that's as sports fans, that's a lot of what we do. Right, is we complain about officiating. So it's funny that for me, I actually have less of an issue than most people do about the officiating in AEW, and the reason why is because I want my stories to make sense, but also I understand that wrestling is not a sport. So the inconsistency in officiating doesn't ruin anything because it's not about competitive fairness. So for me, watching wrestling is about entertainment. And so if I'm thinking, the way I think about it is, would it make more story sense if Rick Knox was in there, getting in front of heels' faces and enforcing rules and things like that? Yeah, it would make more story sense. But would I like the match better if right in the middle of a heat segment or right in the middle of like the 100 dives that was going on, Rick Knox just dove into the middle and was like, no, it's been 10 seconds. We got too many people in the rings. Would that have made the match better? I don't think so. So that for me, I'm willing to give that up.
Here's the thing, right? The thing is, you can have a ref be more, hard on enforcing and still get your shit in, because here's the thing, like what you can do, and we've seen this, because for me, like, what I was gonna say is the only time bad refereeing is like it hurts my experience is when you have blatant interference in front of the ref and they're not distracted and nothing happens. Like New Japan got into the bad habit of this the last year, where like in a lot of Bullet Club matches and Evil matches, you'll have like Bullet Club guys just literally interfering and using weapons on guys who aren't in the match on a guy in the match, and the ref is just staring at it and just like not doing anything. And I'm like, this is really dumb, and I feel dumb for watching this. And that's like not good. But that stuff pretty much never happens in AEW. I think the only time I can remember that was there was one time I think it was honestly just because of a timing issue, but I want to say it was during Christian versus Omega on Rampage that the Young Bucks interfered right in front of the ref. But for the most part, like that doesn't really happen. And again, you can work around having good refereeing and still doing your stuff if you just do like a distraction spot or something with the guy on the sideline, just so it looks as if like the ref was trying to do their job. They were just, barred from doing so in some way. But again, look, if Jimmy Corderas wants to complain about refereeing, it's his prerogative. Whether that's because he has an axe to grind with AEW or he just legitimately, it pisses him off that a referee isn't doing their job. Who knows? But yeah, that's just where I'm at with it.
I don't know. I think that that it's important to realize that good or bad refereeing is the story, or is a small part of the story. Like you say that as a real sports fan, you complain about a bad officiating. And it's like, that makes sense, because like if you were watching a fictional story about a football game or whatever, it would make sense that there's good or bad officiating happening in that story, because that's reality. That's realism. It makes sense that that there's personal differences between different referees. That some of them are more sticklers and some of them are not, etc. That all works.
And within AEW, it's been established, like, for example, Aubrey Edwards is the one who isn't going to let bullshit fly, for example.
Exactly.
You know?
Right.
Yeah, and like I named, like, I literally know Rick Knox specifically because he's the guy that lets the Young Bucks do Young Buck stuff, like, unfiltered. So that does work as well. Like, I will say that, like, if certain refs, because again, in real sports, it's like that too, where people, sports fans, know the ref that is really just hard with certain calls and stuff like that, and then refs who kind of let things fly a little.
Right, like,
so,
you watch sports long enough, and you know, for example, like, we're talking about football, okay, Hockey's going to call the game this way, and I forget the guy's name, but the guy who does Sunday Night Football, he's going to call the game this way, and there's you kind of, if you watch long enough, you do get to know that.
Yes, and Aubrey is AEW's like no fly zone ref, where she is not gonna let nonsense fly. She'll eject the heels on the side. She'll try to adhere more to the conventional tag rules, things like that. So I guess if anything, it would be more of a sticking point or something that just kind of stands out if, like, you had a multi-man tag where Aubrey was just being a complete pushover, I guess.
I think there's a reason that Aubrey usually doesn't officiate the multi-man tags.
That's what I was about to say. Aubrey mostly does singles matches anyway.
Singles matches, yes. And so it's, that is a solid counterpoint.
I don't know if we got any further into figuring out how we feel about officiating in wrestling, but that was a conversation I really enjoyed. So let's move on to a match that many people really enjoyed, and that was, of course, Hikaru Shida against Serena Deeb. And this obviously is in the backdrop of now the TBS title that was just announced that we're going to get as a secondary championship in the women's division. Now, all of this, I think, has some very interesting things that we can talk about, and I think we're going to have some disagreements here about how we feel about certain things happening. But I want to start first with the small, and that's just with this match. For me, I liked this match, obviously. I think I saw a lot of praise for this match that I didn't really agree with. I think you had a lot of people that were saying, this was an incredible technical masterpiece, and it was the best match of the night. Yeah, and that's what I thought. I'm like, okay, yeah, it was fun. Like, it was good, but was it? I didn't think it was. I didn't think it was that good. I thought. So,
what's funny about it, Griff? I think very highly of the ability of Shida and Serena Deeb. And so going into this, I legitimately, and maybe this is too high, but I thought I was going to see a match that would be among the best women's matches in the United States this year.
Oh, wow.
And so maybe I overshot it, because going into Dynamite, like, there were 4 matches announced for the longest time. And I'm thinking, okay, so this is going to get like 20 minutes and they're going to just go insane. It wouldn't quite live up to that. I actually don't even think this was as good as Serena's matches with, like, Riho or Thunder Rosa, for example. I thought those were just fabulous wrestling matches. This was a good wrestling match. There's nothing wrong with it. It was good. Right. You know what I mean? And even more important than the actual in-ring quality of it was what came after it, and that's the whole setup of Deeb turning heel and taking the trophy and denying Shida her 50th win, which really is more important than what took place bell to bell. But yeah, as a wrestling match, like, any 2 other just regular women on the AEW roster, I'd say this is like a good match. But I guess because I have a certain expectation of Deeb because of her own reputation that she's built in AEW, I actually thought this was going to be a bit better. But either way, I really love what came out of this from a story standpoint. And I'm very, very much looking forward to what comes of it. And I also like that Hikaru Shida, who at times is kind of neglected in AEW, I'm glad that, like, not only did they get her on TV just to do something cold and move on, but she now has, like, a storyline. Like a lot of times she doesn't have much of a storyline. She just kind of has matches, and then she disappears after a match. And now she has a story, so that's a good thing. As for the TBS Women's Championship, I honestly think it's yet to be seen when it comes to my opinion of that belt, because it's cool to have a secondary title for the women for sure, but I don't even think that they've done enough to establish a healthy, functioning, strong women's championship scene overall on Dynamite to do a second belt. But it's always yet to be seen. I think that during the pandemic, the NWA Women's title functioned as a secondary women's belt for AEW.
Right.
If you think about it, and that was pretty cool that they did that, so that this could function in that way. So it could be really great, especially depending on who you put the belt on, because there's a lot of candidates to do so. There's only one thing I didn't really like, and I know that she's a heel, but Britt Baker in her promo essentially talked as if like this is clearly the bullshit mid-card belt that you girls who are inferior to me will fight for, and this belt doesn't mean anything because I'm the real champion and I'm at top. And I know that's not like anything groundbreaking. Like tons of wrestlers talk like this and cut promos like this. But I don't know why it just really rubbed me the wrong way. I think it's because like the belt was just debuted on TV and established, and like we go right to like Britt Baker going like kind of dismissively saying like this is the meaningless belt, and I don't know. I feel like maybe you got to wait till the belt is established and booked well and feels important and is presented as important before you have other characters on the show saying things like that, because then you can say they're just they're being a narcissistic heel full of shit and what they're saying isn't true. But being that the belt was just established, maybe Britt is right. Maybe it is a bullshit just belt that the girls that aren't Britt can fight for. That's yet to be disproven, essentially.
Yeah.
So
no,
that
it's definitely a fair criticism. I want to circle back around to discussion of the TBS title in particular. But as far as this match is concerned, I think my opinion on this is probably going to be unpopular with a lot of people. But I really, really like Serena Deeb, and I think her turning heel is, I think it's a perfect spot for her, because I think there are not a ton of heels in AEW period, and there are certainly none in the women's division that are like sadistic submission style technical wrestlers, and that's exactly what Serena Deeb is. And that's her whole character, is like she's gonna put you in lots and lots of pain with her submissions, and she's gonna make it look nasty, and that's gonna be her whole deal. And I really, really like that.
They even gave her Dean Malenko's old nickname of the.
That's right, the woman of 1,000 volts. Exactly. So I really like all of that. What I don't like is Hikaru Shida. I don't like, and I say that. In general. I say that as someone who was 100% there for her title win. I was behind it. I saw it. I was like, this is fantastic. And you can go. I think we had a podcast around that time. I can't remember now. But certainly in the early stages of her championship reign, I was with her 100%. By the end of her championship reign, I was tired of her and I wanted her to go away. I wanted her to go away.
Do you think that was because of her or because of how she was being used?
That I don't know. Now I think she still is a great. I think she still is a great wrestler. The problem is, I think there are lots of great wrestlers on the women's side.
For sure.
I think what made her stand out was how smooth she is in the ring, how technically excellent she is in the ring, and at the time when she was fighting people like Nyla Rose, that really did make her stand out, and I really did feel like, oh wow, this is something special. But now that Britt Baker has really increased her level, now that Jamie Hayter's back, now that you have Serena Deeb, you have Thunder Rosa, you have Ty Conti, you have a lot of these women that to me are also excellent wrestlers physically. There's nothing Shida really brings to the table for me that differentiates her from anyone else in the women's division, but the things that everyone else brings, the fact that Britt Baker is such a strong character, the fact that Ty Conti has this shoot style gimmick that I really like, the fact that Serena Deeb now has this heel persona that I really like, Thunder Rosa is this great baby face, like all of these people have characters that I really care about. Jade Cargill is a great character. The fact that all of these people have characters that I really care about and Shida doesn't, just makes her, to me, kind of feel like yesterday's news, And
what I'll say, Griff, I totally understand what you're saying, and there's definitely other women on the roster that have more I guess, story meat to them, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is this, like, a lot of what you said is true, but Shida to me as a worker is still a level above a lot of those girls who are on the ascent and have a lot going for them. Like for example, Ty Conti has a ton of upside, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she could be a top babyface in this division sooner rather than later.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think as a worker she's on Cheetah's level.
Yeah.
And that goes for a couple of the girls. For me, I think without you even realizing it, a lot of what you're saying is an indictment more on how AEW used Hikaru Shida rather than her as a performer. Because the thing with her in her title reign, I didn't enjoy a lot of her title reign, and it wasn't because of her. Like, her matches on pay-per-view were always really good, but the thing is, she would disappear on television for weeks at a time and resurface when it was time to get a new challenger. And oftentimes it was just kind of like, this is the person that's going to face her. It wasn't like there was a narrative behind it. It was just, this is the person who faces her, and they just show you who it is. They have a stare down or something, and then that person that Cheetah's going to face has 2 to 3 wins on television, and then they have a good match, and then Cheetah kind of disappears for a month. And it's hard to be invested in somebody when it's like that. And
I think you're absolutely right. And what I'm coming to realize here is, for me, I think the issue is that Shida now, her title reign stands in stark contrast to what Britt Baker is doing as the champion, and I think the issue that
they have the complete opposite strengths when you think about it. Like, Britt totally shines as like a personality and a character, and she carries so many segments, and she's a phenomenal promo, and she's super over. And then Shida is all about the wrestling. You know, the positive of Shida's reign was the actual wrestling is really good, and Britt is getting better, but to me, again, I don't think she's the wrestler that Shida is. You know, but
no,
like I said,
I would
it's
agree
complete,
with you.
Yeah, it's complete opposite strengths in my opinion.
I absolutely agree with you. So I think what I'm seeing, the real issue with Shida, I think, is I got really frustrated with how AEW decided to use her. Not necessarily making her the champion. I think that's okay, because there is room to tell a story where your best wrestler is your world champion. And I think actually AEW tends not to do that. I think only when Shida was champion, and now when Kenny Omega is world champion, I think those are the only 2 times that truly, and now the Lucha Brothers being tag champions, those are the only times where AEW truly made the best wrestler the champion, like purely the best physical wrestler. My issue then with Shida is the fact that they did that, and they like, she was never given a character. My issue was that when she won, I realized that it was on the strength of the heel in that match, which is ironic because that heel is Nyla Rose, and no one in the women's division has more go away heat with me than Nyla Rose. But the thing that happened with Shida, and I really think the issue is, she is not a fluent English speaker, and so when she cut a promo, I just lost interest in everything she was doing, and you can do that for a non-championship storyline, but when you're talking about a title storyline, especially in AEW, you need to have strong stories and strong promos, and that's exactly what Britt Baker is all about. So I'm a huge fan of Britt Baker. I love what she's doing, and it's made me, I think, dislike Shida more than I really should, just because of the contrast between them.
I'll ask you this then. So the Lucha Brothers aren't fluent English speakers. Do you think that's gonna ruin their title reign? Because like, do you think the Lucha Brothers will be able to overcome that? Because they're, seemingly way more over than Shida is.
So,
and I mean, people will go crazy for them. You know what I mean? So
I think it's a combination. I think it's a combination of several things. I think that they are more charismatic when they speak than Shida is. So I don't think necessarily you have to be fluent in English to cut a good promo. That's not what I'm saying, because Andrade can cut a hell of a promo, and he's not completely fluent in English. So that's definitely not what I'm saying. I think that they have more charisma when they speak than Shida does. I think that naturally, because of their athleticism, they're going to be over because they're doing all of this incredible stuff that no one else in the world can do. And at the end of the day, Shida's a great wrestler, but she's not doing stuff like that. You know, she's not diving off the top of cages. She's not running on the tops of ropes and things like that the way Phoenix can, the way that Phoenix can. So I think that plays into it. And I think the Penta Says gimmick is really over. And obviously Alex Abrahantes does also, he is a fluent English speaker, and he's become a really good promo. So I think all of that in combination makes the Lucha Brothers, for me, on a different level than Shida.
I'll tell you what, Griff. I think I'd be more in line with exactly what you're saying the moment that the Ty Contis of the world, and or the Jade Cargills of the world, advance and progress further. Because once Ty Conti and Jade Cargill, if they ever become great wrestlers, that for sure would eliminate, I guess, the need of a Hikaru Shida at a top level. But I can't take that stance yet because those ladies are not there yet. I'm curious what Sergi thinks.
Well, yes, thank you. I definitely really disagree with the general direction that everything's been going in here. Hikaru Shida, I'll give you that Hikaru Shida has a very square character. She is a lot like an example of the same kind of character was the guy from Japan that came over to challenge for Moxley's U.S. title a few weeks ago.
Yuji Nagata?
Yes, Yuji Nagata. Not Minoru Suzuki. Yeah, Yuji Nagata.
Are you talking about Kojima? Kojima was all out. He was the guy in the orange, and Nagata was the one in Daly's place who faced him in the blue gear.
Yuji Nagata, the Blue Justice, just that very straight, like the good guy from an anime, just very, I will try my best. I love that about her. Just completely earnest, and you try to get under her skin, and she just says, I will try my best. It's a very straightforward kind of a pure babyface character. It's not gonna be something that hooks with everybody, but for me, it's great. I'm happy to have that contrast with other characters. She's not going to be anybody's favorite character probably, and she's going to be much less than favorite for others who want a little more color than that. But she makes an excellent contrast with other characters, and that's very valuable.
I think that's a very fair point.
And I think that But
I was going to say, do you agree with my assessment that I think Griff felt the way he did a lot, not because of her as a performer, but just rather her utilization, where like it was kind of, especially during her title reign, where it was like she would win her title defense, disappear for a bit, and then kind of cool off, and then like they just kind of threw another challenger at her, and then they'd have a stare down and then have another title match.
Well, if, like Griff said, he liked her just fine until she was champion, and now he doesn't. Yeah. It's like it's the reign itself that wore on him. I mean, that's pretty clear. I really think that there were moments in that reign that were great. I thought that her feud with the Zombie Girl, I had no problem with that. I enjoyed the heck out of that. And her feud, and the one chance that she had to have a feud that had real history to it with Ryo Mizunami, that was a fantastic feud, if you're willing to read some subtitles. And then this match.
The Mizunami match was good. I thought that was underrated. Their match at Revolution, you could make the argument, and you definitely would have to argue it, but you can make the argument that it was the best match of that show, to my memory.
It was one of the best for sure.
I have no issue with Shida in the ring.
Match. I think that this was the best match of this show. I can see hoping more for it, like you did. I could see.
You thought Deeb versus Shida was the best match on Dynamite.
Oh, wow.
I am very. I
Wow.
will admit that I am biased towards singles matches. Singles matches are kind of where I like tag matches fine.
That's
They're
fair.
entertaining, but I when it's 1 versus 1 and it's that clash of two people, that's going to be something special for me.
I'll tell you what though. No, I do totally agree with you there. I had to just kind of accept and get used to multi-man tags in AEW because the Bucks are really good at doing them. But I am of the same band though. I do prefer, in general, when it comes to shows, I'm more of a singles match oriented guy, and I prefer the more singles matches over tag matches. I just think you just get more out of them for me personally. But so I could understand that. I could understand that.
But yeah, it was definitely one of the best matches of the night. I don't think there were any singles matches that clearly were on another level. I think that the top 10 match of the year, if that's what your expectation was, I can see how you could be disappointed. Maybe it wasn't on that level. But I loved that if you look at the stats and if you compare them to what they're used to, that this is not one of those cases. A lot of times you'll see when a character like Deeb gets a big win, it's because she has shut down her opponent. She has found ways to stop her opponent from effectively putting in their offense. Not the case here. Both sides got their stuff in, and I mean, both sides put on their best match. This was not a case of Shida's offense being shut down. She got her offense in, so did Deeb, and Deeb just got the win over the best Shida, if you see what I mean. And that's pretty amazing, and a really great a boost for Deeb, along with the character boost of her being a spoiler. She was in the spoiler role to begin with, just in setting up that this would be her 50th win, and then having the plaque made like it was a foregone conclusion. Just an awesome way to give Deeb this really justifiable reason to kind of have that grudge of and then of course hitting her with it is just it's what's that the gun Chekhov's pistol, the Chekhov's gun. It's like if you show a trophy in wrestling, someone's bound to get smacked with it, and that's what we got.
I really did like one of the things that I think was so encouraging to me about the match is the fact that coming in, they were talking about, oh, Shida's going to get her 50th win. Maybe this was just me, but I was sitting here going, I don't give a damn whether she gets her 50th win or not. That doesn't mean anything to me. Like that, it's just a number on a piece of paper. I don't care. So what they decided to do was actually make a story out of it, and that I'm really impressed by.
Taking what was an expected accomplishment away from this person, and now it's
right. Well, so now
now it's a point of contention.
Right, now I actually give a damn about what number win Shida's on. When they didn't give me a reason before, now I actually care about, how many wins does she have, and the fact that, when you do see something like this, especially in AEW's women's division, where if you're not the world championship story, you probably are not going to get a whole lot of time to develop what you're doing. In the past few weeks, we've seen that that's not necessarily the case, and now even more, they give us this thing, and they make the plaque, and you feel like, oh, well, this is, Shida's going to get her win, and it's going to be a big moment, and at least for me, I'm not going to care, and then we're going to move on. But no, what they actually gave me was a story I care about, a character I care about in Serena Deeb, and maybe this will help me turn back around on Shida, because I agree with what you guys are saying. I probably have more of an issue with the booking, the way that she was used, than I have necessarily with her personally. I think there's room for her in AEW. You just have to figure out what you're going to do, and I think she I think she lives and dies on the strength of the heel she's fighting. And in this case, I think Serena Deeb is a perfect opponent for her.
Yeah, I was gonna say the one thing I'm sure that everybody can agree with is I'm sure the one thing that we can all agree with at this point is that what's being set up here is absolutely interesting with her and Serena Deeb.
Yep, I do absolutely
Sure.
agree with that. So let's parlay this into talking about the TBS Championship. Now, this is one again where I think we're going to get some disagreements, but one where I want to hear Sergi's perspective on it first. Sergi, what do you think about this title? What do you think about what they're setting up? The rapid fire vignettes that we saw from a lot of the women who are presumably going to be involved. Ibu mentioned Britt Baker's promo talking about it. I mean, how do you think this is the first new title that they've established in over a year now? So, their first new title since the TNT Championship. So, what do you think about where we're at here? What do you think about it?
I'm very, very hopeful and positive about the TBS Championship. When they said that was what they were going to do, I had an internal cheer. Just, this is a great direction to go with the women's champion, or with the women's division, in the sense that if they treat the TBS Championship similarly to how they've treated the TNT Championship, as that is a championship that is defended very regularly, just about weekly, that's going to just put the women's division into overdrive of, there are women getting exposure every week, in addition to whatever's going on with Britt Baker. And that just, just puts people on the map, puts people on TV, and I think that that's great. And I think that it will be great to see the kinds of stories that we've seen in a TNT title reign type of situation of, this is someone who puts on excellent matches with all kinds of people. She sometimes will bring in people from outside to feature. Sometimes she will bring up people that have only really done enhancement type of things and show a different side to them. All of that, and then also show how a reign where you have to defend so regularly, how that wears you down, and how their weaknesses are exposed, and they eventually have to fall. And it's a great story, and I've seen it regularly in TNT with different slightly different takes on it, depending on who the champion is, and it's been really fascinating, and I'd love to see that on the women's side. I definitely don't see a problem with, there's, give the women's division any kind of a fair shot. It can't just revolve around the women's title. And the only other way to do it would be to have regular grudge feuds that, in addition to whatever's going on with the women's title. And, that's not something that they've proven any real adeptness in doing. We haven't really seen a lot of those, a couple, but not as many as I'd like to see. And if we've got this secondary title, if we've got this TBS Championship that's being defended very regularly, I think that's going to be a great way to see the women's division featured a lot more regularly. And everything that happens with the TBS Championship should spin out into their own things. You know what I'm saying? You've got these people who have these attempts at taking the TBS Championship, and that's going to lead into something else for them after. In a lot of cases, not every time, but a lot of times that's going to spin out into something after.
You know what I want to say about this? A lot of times, sometimes people will, oftentimes people will talk about how they don't want, a promotion to have too many belts, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of times when people make those, when people voice those concerns, it makes a lot of sense, because belts have to have prestige and they have to have meaning, and you don't want to dilute them and devalue them by just having so many of them that don't mean anything. But at the same time, in the case of AEW, because there have been people who don't really understand why this belt is being made. Sergi, can you mute again? I'm sorry, I'm hearing the echo again. I'm sorry.
No problem.
Yeah. So the thing is, I've seen people kind of complain about this TBS women's thing. And look, could it suck? Sure. But I'll tell you what, right? To me, when you have a roster as deep as AEW's, I'm a bit welcoming of a few more belts, to be honest with you, because belts do keep people busy,
Yeah.
and it's a vehicle to feature more of the um lower, not lower end talent, but just some of the extended members of the roster who are more of the guys you see maybe once a month, and you get them more in a bit you cycle them in a bit more regularly,
Yeah.
because the AEW roster structure is one where the stars are featured a lot, and so the people a little bit under that are guys who kind of are there to be fed to the bigger talents like periodically. And I do think that the talent level and depth is so deep that it warrants a few more championships to keep some of these people busy.
Mhm.
And as long as you book and you book these people regularly and let them wrestle and let them get over, you give value to these belts by having them booked well and having great matches for them.
Yeah.
So, you know, I've heard people say that they'd prefer this would have been a trios championship, and I want a trios title too. But I'm also not totally against a secondary women's championship, depending on how it's used. Like, I'm not gonna, Sergi said, like, hopefully it's gonna be like the TNT title, and I'll say this: if it is, then that's a massive success, because the TNT championship has been a big success.
Right. Well, that was the one thing that I was going to say as well, because you and I a couple weeks ago had talked about how we would prefer a trios title as opposed to a secondary women's title, and I'm with you.
Yeah.
I still am with that preference. I still would prefer a trios championship at this point, but I'm certainly not against a secondary women's title. I will say this though.
No.
I don't like the way that it's being discussed. So this necessarily doesn't have to do with AEW or the way that the belt is being presented or whatever. The way that it's being discussed, to me, it feels like a lot of people are kind of putting the cart before the horse. It's sort of like it's like I'll be happy when I just kind of thing. Because people are saying, well, the women's division isn't booked well, so if we just do this, if we just do that, if we just do this, then suddenly, the women's division will be booked well. And for me, I don't think that's a good way to look at it. I don't like saying, well, if we just give them a second championship, then it'll be better. Because to me, that opens the door to anything that people don't like, saying, well, if we just do this, then we'll, if we just, have the women main event every pay-per-view, then they'll be better. I just feel like it's not a good way to look at it. A better way to look at it would be to say, what do we want to do with the women's division? And I've said it a lot. I've said it a bunch of times. If AEW wanted to be New Japan in the US and just not have women, fine, do whatever you want. Just, but if you're going to have women, give me a reason that they're there. Book them as well as you do with the men and make it interesting. And I don't necessarily think you need a secondary championship to be able to do that. So I think it's not necessarily a cure.
It's my belief. Sure. It's not. It's definitely not like this belt exists so AEW is, their women's division handling the problems have been fixed and it's saved. I don't think it's that, but it is a step in the sense that clearly they're trying to make an effort to better it, and that's the case because they did the vignette where and they've been doing a lot of vignettes like this to kind of like show you who their players are. Mm-hmm. And they did another one here where you got to hear a bit from Thunder Rosa and Jade Cargill and even Sky Blue and a couple other girls about the tournament. And tournaments to me are always an effective storytelling device in wrestling in terms of just getting people over and really just kind of showcasing the skill set of your roster.
Yeah.
And what I'll say is this. I think you are correct. You don't need a second belt to make a division better. But I do think, honestly, I really feel like Tony Khan is just going to keep the AEW Women's Championship on Brit for a very, very long time. And because of that, they almost made the secondary belt to be able to have another woman on their roster feel special and like a champion without having to take the belt off Brit. New Japan actually did this themselves. because in the 2010s, the real reason the IWGP Intercontinental Championship was made, truthfully, was because they wanted their world title to be Tanahashi's belt. And so if you're going to make it Tanahashi's belt and you want to feature other people like stars, they're almost, you could argue it's a crutch, but their solution was to create a second belt that feels like a world title and is booked like one, be fought for amongst the other talents. And that ended up being the belt that other guys fought for when Okada had the belt.
Right.
And I see this being of a similar vein, where it's treated like a major belt that also keeps the girls away from Britt, because, you know, Khan sees Britt as like the ace and the moneymaker of the women's division.
Well, I think he's absolutely, if he sees her like that, I think his assessment is absolutely correct. But I will say that if AEW's inclusion of the TBS title is at all going to mirror what New Japan did with the Intercontinental Championship, I mean, I think we're in for something pretty special, because, you know, we're talking about a belt that, you know, you're right. I think a big consideration was New Japan saying we have our aces, and at the time it was Tanahashi, and then it became Okada, and then it became Styles, and New Japan saying we have these guys, but we want, you know, we have a deep roster. We want other guys to feel special. Well, I mean, it was, 5 years later that the Intercontinental Championship was main eventing Wrestle Kingdom. So if that's going to be what the TBS title is, then I'm absolutely here for it.
Mm-hmm.
Sergio, I'll give you the last. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was going to say, and I'm willing to put, I'm not going to say money on it, but I'm very sure and certain.
Put $5 on it.
Yeah, right. I'll put $5 on it that a TBS Championship match will main event an AEW show sooner rather than later.
Okay, all right. Well, you know that there's interest on that, so I'll take that. Sergi, I'll give you the last word.
Interest.
I'll give you the last word on TBS title.
I think that Ibo makes a lot of really good points. I don't know. I was not into the idea of a TNT championship before they introduced it. I was like, you know,
really?
Hey, the world title is the world title. It's the only title that matters. You know, we're different from these other promotions. They've, you know, but then they introduced it and they treated it differently, in a way that didn't mean that they treated it as lesser. You know, it's a championship that's defended super regularly, and that the choice of opponents, the choice of contenders, is not based on the ranking system. Those are two really huge aspects of what makes the TNT Championship unique, and if they replicate that with a TBS Championship, it's just going to be really special, and I anticipate a lot of good things. I'm definitely not as down with this idea of trio championships, just because that puts gold on so many people. 3 more champions, 3 more people with gold who don't have that pressure of, I don't have gold, what am I going to do to get it? But, you know, if they decide to go that direction, they've proven me wrong before, so we'll see.
I hope that they will give. I hope that they will give themselves the opportunity to prove you wrong again. That's all I'm going to say about that. But I absolutely understand that critique.
For sure. So what we got next, man?
Let's do some quick hits. Much like the vignettes that we saw about the TBS title, we will be short, and they'll probably be better than us. But that's just generally how it goes. Lots of very short but meaningful segments on between Dynamite and Rampage, whether it's matches or promos or segments. So quick hits will be, I guess, a little longer, a little bit some more stuff, but things that I think it's important to cover anyway. And we'll start with the Darby Allin and MJF situation. Sergey, I want to give you the first word on this, because we had a really great conversation about this last week on the podcast. Between Darby Allin's match with Nick Comoroto, which was kind of a nothing match, there was an unfortunate TV break that basically was the entire length of the match. So it's bound to happen. You know, we all knew what that match was going to be, but then we got the beatdown of Darby Allin by presumably the Pinnacle. What'd you think about this segment?
Oh, it's one of those segments that's pretty much the question is how they follow up on it, and it leaves you with questions in your mind. Where are they going with this? Why would MJF suddenly want to wear masks? Why would the Pinnacle want to wear masks all of a sudden? We all know exactly who it is. My presumption, there's many ways that they could go with it. My presumption is that they intend to gaslight everybody and deny that it was them, even though it's obvious. And my guess would be that Darby Allin no-sells the whole thing. And it's just like, yeah, who cares? Some guys in masks jumped me. That happens to me so regularly. It's like that meme from Batman Beyond of you don't realize how little that narrows it down, and just completely no sell that MJF's trying to gaslight him, but it's like we didn't touch you. It's like I don't really care if you did. Like I get jumped all the time. Who cares?
Could you imagine a JR sit down interview where he's just like, you've now been jumped on Dynamite by presumably the inner circle. The Pinnacle, and Darby's just kind of like, Darby's just like, it sounds like a normal Wednesday for me. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Oh man, I didn't even think about it that way, but you're absolutely right. I like the thing about the Pinnacle wearing the masks and stuff. To me, it just feels like one of those, like, just one of those random things that they don't need to do, but they do just because they're dicks, And like think about someone that you don't like just in your life, and they always do things that you're like, why do you need to do that? Like, why do you feel the need to say that or do this? That's what the Pinnacle are. I mean, there's no reason for them. We all knew who they were. That's the way I feel about it, and it just it got heat, and it feels like one of those kind of placeholder things. Eventually we're gonna get more promos, more of that sort of, very heated words between Allen and MJF. But this one felt like just a placeholder to get heat, and it did its job in that regard.
My only thoughts on this MJF Darby thing from this week is this. Earlier in the show, it was announced that match would be for the following Dynamite. And like, I immediately groaned, like, oh my God, like, look, because the thing is, the positive of AEW is that they want to make their television feel like destination TV, and they want to make it feel like every show has an elevated level of importance, and that you get big matchups. And I totally understand that, and I actually really appreciate that. But with an MJF Darby, when I first heard that at the time, it was like, man, I really want this. I really want them to marinate this like a lot more, and really just drum up the heat and the animosity here, and really tell a great story leading to this first match, especially since they're really going forward with this whole 4 pillars of AEW thing. And so it's like, all right, let's make a matchup between these 2 pillars feel like it's like the biggest thing ever, and not just a thing on a Dynamite. And so I was so appreciative that this angle led to them saying that Darby Allin will not be able to make it till next week's Dynamite. I really do appreciate that, because I personally. And yeah, I am old school here in the sense that, I've been watching wrestling for a while, and, I came up on the save it for the pay-per-view era, right? And so, it took a while, but AEW helped me unlearn that mentality. But in the case of Darby Allin and MJF, I really do hope that they really build to this and save it for the pay-per-view, because I think it can be more than just a 3.5-star TV match. I think this can be something really, really special and emotional, depending on what they put into it.
Yep, I 100% agree. I already, by the way, bought the 4 Pillars t-shirt, so that is in the mail right now. I'm proud of that one.
As far as that goes, I definitely would agree that it's great that they're giving this more time. I don't necessarily agree that they need to extend it out to the pay-per-view. Maybe that's the plan, and that would be fine. But, if they want to make this a big main event of a big Dynamite, that sounds great too. The real question, I think, for these two is, am I going over? This is a case where both guys have a lot to lose, and I think that in this case, MJF has a lot more to lose. MJF hasn't really gotten a big win in a while, and needs to prove that he is a force to be reckoned with. And I think that that's really an important aspect of this right now. the whole point of MJF is that I have built this whole support structure. What's it for? It's to support a champion, which he's not, and he needs to fix that. And you know, he had to get the inner circle out of his way and out of his rearview mirror first, and that's understandable. But now, now he's just killing time in a way.
And now it's time to actually have some tangible accomplishments, especially for a guy of his level. For a guy of his level, like you think like there'd be some type of goal on the pinnacle. So I agree with that. And to be honest with you, like, and maybe we'll get into this a bit later, but I'm just not totally sold on Sammy Guevara just as a whole, and I would have no issue with, after a couple more title defenses, he lose that belt to MJF. Especially since their first match was fantastic on that Dynamite in Daly's place, and so I'd love to see a rematch for the TNT title where MJF win it, especially since they are, you know, quote unquote fellow pillars. So I'd like to see something like that.
Well, how about we get into that right now then? That was the next topic of discussion, Sammy's match against Bobby Fish for the TNT Championship. This one, I think, is... it seemed to me like this is going to be what we should expect from Sammy as the TNT champion. A little bit more traditional babyface kind of thing. And I mean, I thought it worked pretty well. I enjoyed the match. I really like Bobby Fish. I really like what he's about. And I really like the way he approaches matches. So I can't wait for him to fight Bryan Danielson on Dynamite next week, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But I mean, I thought it was fun, and I thought it got Sammy over, which is what it was supposed to do. It ends with this big babyface comeback by Sammy and a really cool reversal into the GTS, which I thought was awesome. I really, really like that. So, Sergio, what did you think about this one?
GTH.
Sorry,
but,
GTH.
It was all right. The GTH is a fantastic finisher. I enjoyed the match. I don't have a ton to say about the match. I do have something to say about what Ibu was saying about the TNT title as a possibility for MJF. I certainly would not, if that's the direction they go, I wouldn't have a problem with it, but it wouldn't be my choice, just because I feel that MJF would see that, even though the TNT title should be considered almost on the level of the world title, I don't know that MJF as a character should see it that way, and might see it as below him, and also as way too much work. Like, MJF would be like, how often would I have to defend this damn thing against all counters, basically? Like, as world champion, I can say, if you haven't reached the top of the ladder, you don't get to touch me. You know, as TNT champion, you don't have that protection.
You know what's funny about that? I was gonna say, because I could see the character of MJF saying, "Fuck Sammy Guevara, I'm gonna take his belt." But I could also, so I could see him wanting to get it out of spite. But at the same time, yes, he's not somebody who would want to be a workhorse and defend it like every week. So yes,
exactly.
Yep. I agree with both of you on that one.
What we got next?
We're talking about the people that MJF left behind, and that was, of course, the Inner Circle. They are now embroiled with American Top Team, and we're going to get a match on I think that's on Dynamite on Saturday. So the thing that I really liked about this, and if you've been listening to the podcast, you know that I have been a fan of the American Top Team stuff. I've really enjoyed it. I really like Dan Lambert. But one of the things that I really liked about this is the fact that when Dan Lambert started talking, the boos were so loud. And they were just, they were like, it's nuclear heat in there. And what I loved was that just casually during this thing, he drops that a former UFC heavyweight champion is going to be wrestling next week. Like, he just says that, but you can't even hear it because people are booing so loudly. So that, to me, I mean, we talk all the time about, does Lambert and the American Top Team, do they have go-away heat or do they have real heat? For me, go-away heat doesn't sound like that. I think Go Away Heat usually is, it can't,
Indifference.
A lot of times it's quiet.
Spirited.
Yeah, you just don't hear anything. But if it is loud, you're exactly, Sergi. It feels like, I don't know. There's just a different feeling to it. That did not feel like Go Away Heat to me. That felt like real heat, and I'm really, really excited to see Junior Dos Santos in a pro wrestling ring. And the reason why is because in the segment beforehand where they were doing a beatdown, Dos Santos was actually throwing some pretty solid worked punches. Like, he was doing some ground and pound and stuff like that. They looked pretty stiff, so I'm excited to see. Like, I don't know if he's been doing training or if they're gonna do sort of a hot tag spot for him, and he's gonna get in, throw 3 punches, knock a dude out, and be done. I don't know, or if he actually wants to be a pro wrestler. I don't know what the deal is, but I don't know. His work punches sold me, so I'm excited for it. What do you guys think?
I have no clue what to. Oh, go ahead, Sergi.
No, I just want to concede to you that I felt the same way about those boos. I have been very down on this character and on this storyline. And at this point, just hearing the reaction that he got, that I can concede that this was a case of, this is a segment that is just not for me. But as in terms of the variety show that Dynamite is, that I'm in the minority, and that this is something that
people clearly
people are enjoying hating this guy. I personally could do without him. If he disappeared off the face of the earth tomorrow, I would not cry. But the fans do seem to love hating him. So, hey, use that heat for what you can use it for.
Sergi, totally the funny thing about it is, when the first week that I saw Lambert, right, on Dynamite, I actually really, really enjoyed the segment, right? But then my whole thing was, because, it was his subsequent appearances that got the criticism. And for me, it was, I don't have a problem with the act as an act. My problem is, where is this going? And because just having a guy rant about shit for just for the sake of doing it doesn't do much for me, right? But it needs to have a direction and a purpose. And a lot of people weren't fans of the Lambert stuff, and that was kind of my thing. My thing was like, the act is fine and he gets a lot of heat. I just need it to go somewhere. And I pointed out that because I was at 2 Dynamites last month. I was in the Newark one and I was in the Arthur Ashe show. And I pointed out on Twitter that being in Newark, when he cut his promo on Chris Jericho, I said that being in the building, people did have a really good time shitting on Dan Lambert. Like, the minute he came out, like, everybody around me rose up in excitement to be able to boo and curse him out. Like, it was like this weird, almost like red meat for the AEW fans to just kind of bite this guy and just yell and be angry. Like, they were waiting to just get this frustration out of for whatever reason. And seeing it from that perspective, I don't want to say it's eye-opening, because I could already see that, but it does kind of make me more aware to this, I guess. And so, yeah, it's definitely something that if even if you're not a fan of his approach, his act, his gimmick, or just anything about him, at this point, it should be acknowledged that it's not like it's a part of the show that the people in the arena are just indifferent or listless to. They're absolutely up for booing him and hoping that he gets his shit pushed in by the babyfaces, who in this case are Chris Jericho and the guys. As for the match, I'm not particularly excited for it, nor do I even know what to expect.
That's why I'm excited, because when AEW gives us stuff like this that we don't know what to expect, and in that I mean like Shaquille O'Neal, like that kind of thing. Generally, it like that Shaq match was the most unexpectedly great match I've ever seen, and not it was great.
I was actually looking forward to that. I actually kind of like the Shaq storyline.
No. See, I did too, but just in the sense that I had no idea what to expect out of the match, and it turned out that I thought it was fantastic, and I really enjoyed it. It's for that reason that I'm really looking forward to this match with that we're gonna get on Dynamite, because I don't know what to expect, and I've enjoyed the story coming in. The last times that's happened, I've gotten really good matches out of it that I really liked, so that's why I'm really excited for it.
Yeah, for me, I'm not a big fan of the Men of the Year in general. Like they're under a category in AEW for me where they're by no means bad wrestling talents, but they could be no longer employed by AEW, and it wouldn't affect my experience at all. And so they're kind of like that for me. And so I'm just not big on the Men of the Year. And as far as the MMA talents that are with Lambert, I couldn't really care less about any of them. Even though I'm familiar with most of them, but I couldn't care less about any of them except Jorge Masvidal. And so because he's not really involved in a wrestling capacity, I'm not like jumping for joy at this. But I mean, I'm curious to see how it turns out, specifically to see if Dos Santos. Because the thing is, if Dos Santos looks great, obviously there's going to be the door open for more professional wrestling opportunities for him. But if he looks horrible, then it'll be something that AEW kind of goes, well, never mind that thing, and they'll just hit the eject button on that. It could go either way with that.
And you and I talked about AEW's willingness to do that, how they've done that in the past, and it's okay. Like, you're allowed to try things that don't work. So if it turns out Dos Santos can't wrestle, then whatever. It's fine.
Do you guys remember Warhorse? Mm-hmm. He was one of the challengers for Cody's TNT Championship. Yep. And I don't remember much of the match except it just being kind of average. But Tony Khan has made allusions to certain guys being in that TNT Open Challenge that he thought totally sucked, and they never were on Dynamite again. And if you just use context clues, he's talking about Warhorse. So that's the thing. Like that's his mindset. It's just he's very much a guy who he'll give you a borderline tryout on television. Yeah. And if you look good, you look good, and if you don't, you don't. I mean, look at Bobby Fish. He faced Sammy, and then he got signed after the show. You know what I mean?
It happened so quick that I thought it had happened before the show, and I just didn't know about it.
No, Tony's very much a guy who's just like, all right, we'll put him on Dynamite, and then wow, that was great. Here's a contract, or well, never mind. So and I kind of respect that aspect of him because it's very much a meritocracy where it's just like if you do good, you will be rewarded for it. Oh yeah. And so this will be a situation like that where I think this match will be a turning point in the storyline one way or the other. Because if it's a good match and Dos Santos looks good, it's going to spawn into other sub-matches involving him and maybe some of the other top team guys. And if it's absolutely abysmal, then you'll probably see AEW course correct.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I'm not going to blame AEW for trying something. For trying this. I think, again, this is something that we were actually talking about before we started recording. One of the things that WWE has... One of the main reasons that they've become the biggest name in wrestling from casual fans or non-fans is because of their involvement in things outside of pro wrestling. And I think AEW gradually is starting to get into that a little bit. And I'm not saying that they need to compete with WWE or anything like that, but it is really cool for us as wrestling fans to see our favorite wrestlers and our favorite wrestling company be acknowledged in the world beyond just pro wrestling. And this is one of the things that AEW, this is one of those ways that AEW is trying to do it, by bringing these guys who are well known in the mixed martial arts world to bring them into AEW and start to combine that. And then eventually maybe it'll go the other way. And then you could see, Jorge Masvidal's next fight, like Chris Jericho shows up and they actually make reference to that. Oh, here's Chris Jericho, AEW wrestler, that kind of thing. I think for all of us, just as fans of the promotion, it's cool to see. And you're absolutely right. If it doesn't work, then I think Tony Khan has shown that he's willing to dump that and pretend like it never happened. And so if we don't like Junior Dos Santos, it'll be gone, and he won't be there. So.
Yeah. They don't do. They're not a promotion that doubles down on things that are poorly received and enforce them.
Right. So, exactly. Very receptive to what the fans like or don't like. The Lucha Brothers put their tag team championships on the line against the Acclaimed. You talk about some heels that have some real heat. I think the Acclaimed are in that category. But this match for me, I mean, I thought it was cool. But I really, for a match like this with characters like the Acclaimed, I feel like I wanted a better story from this. And as good as their promo on Dynamite was and their rap on Rampage was. It's always great when you get Max Caster in that regard. Anthony Bowens can cut a decent promo, especially on the back of what Max Caster has done. He plays a really good straight man to Caster's, brash and boisterous rapper persona. So I think these two combine really well. I just wanted to see a little bit more promo work and segment work out of a match like this. I think that's what the Acclaimed really thrive on, and the problem with this match is it was physically it was good, but it was like 5 minutes long, and the Lucha Brothers can cram a lot of stuff into 5 minutes. That's definitely true.
Yes, they can.
But I kind of ended up,
yes, they can.
Like, it was, I don't know. I thought it was fine. I don't know. Sergi, can you persuade me one way or the other if I should feel a certain way about this match?
Well, there were two sides of it. It did not have that much build-up. That's true. There's definitely an issue in the tag division of guys reaching the number one contendership point or reaching number one in the rankings and then just getting a shot based on beating who'd they beat? Did just a bunch of enhancement talent, or did they actually beat another legitimate team to get to that point? That's an issue, just in terms of storytelling. But within that match, I thought I saw a lot of things from the Lucha Brothers that were just so much fun that it kind of wiped that away for me. And for me, I mean, the Acclaimed are quite capable of doing fun stuff, but here they were just an effective base, and that's fine too. That's an important role, and they filled that role.
They were bodies to just bump for the Lucha Brothers while they did all their stuff.
And the Lucha Brothers stuff was fun to watch, even if it was for only 5 minutes.
That is very true. Now, I think what became apparent to me early on was how, I don't want to say how difficult it is to work with the Lucha Brothers, but how different it is to work with the Lucha Brothers.
Yes.
And it really proved that to me.
Yes.
Penta was going to do his backstabber spot in the corner, the one that Caster ended up reversing, and Caster was about to go into the ropes, and Penta sort of had to guide him back into the corner that he wanted to do it on. I think, I'm not saying that was necessarily a botch. I think they covered it well enough. I think what I noticed really out of that is the Acclaimed are an up-and-coming team. They're really talented. I like what they do, but working with the Lucha Brothers is just a completely different experience than any of these guys that are not very experienced in wrestling have ever done before. And I think it really showed that, it takes, there's a little bit of a learning curve when you're going to work with the Lucha Brothers, and more experienced teams deal with that really well. The Acclaimed, they had some rough patches, nothing that made me hate the match, but I just thought it was interesting to see.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I was gonna say that I have very little to say about this match or this program, because I didn't, and the Lucha Brothers are terrific. The Acclaimed, I think that they're an act that they work in a certain way. And I thought the last time they had a program where it was built on story, promos and things like that I was interested in was on the YouTube shows they were building to them in Griff Garrison and Pillman, and that was getting pretty interesting until Caster kind of got himself in trouble over his rap, and then that kind of cut the program off, and it took the steam off that. But regarding the whole thing about in-ring chemistry with the Lucha Brothers, it brings up an interesting point, because here's the thing. When the WWE signs luchadors, they typically will kind of make them adjust their style to a degree, and work a more American WWE oriented style to be able to kind of assimilate to what they do.
Yeah.
And usually it involves a lot of stylistic sacrifice to a degree, and they kind of don't really get to do a lot of their lucha stuff until it's their segment to do the babyface shine spots and their comebacks. And some guys, for a lot of the luchadors that went to WWE, it really hurt them. Mm-hmm. And only really, truly, the really, really great ones were able to overcome that, like a Rey Mysterio, for example, who was still terrific, even with even having to alter himself, right?
Right.
But I bring that up to say this. In AEW, clearly, because they don't want to do that, they want people to be themselves. Part of what comes with that is they're telling the Lucha Brothers clearly, like, just do what you guys do. Even whatever you did in Mexico, do it here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And doing that fully unleashes them as they are. But it does come with its own consequences. So, like,
Right.
wrestlers who are versed in Lucha Libre and have worked places can work with them, and it's terrific. Jungle Boy can go toe to toe with what the Lucha Brothers do, and it's awesome. Like the Jurassic Express, when they face the Lucha Brothers, it's awesome. When the Young Bucks face the Lucha Brothers, we've seen what that comes, what that breeds, right? They know how to work with them. It's incredible.
Yep.
We haven't seen it yet, but you know that when Top Flight takes on the Lucha Brothers, that's going to be another just fireworks show, right?
Yeah.
But I don't even know if you guys remember this match, but if you go back to in the pandemic, FTR faced the Lucha Brothers, and by no means was it a bad match because both teams are fantastic,
Yeah.
but it wasn't the great match you could expect because there's just so much stylistic difference to the point where it's borderline jarring. And I do think that certain types of teams that maybe are less world traveled, I guess I could say, and more just kind of traditionally, fundamentally American style tag teams are going to have a bit of a disconnect working with the Lucha Brothers. And it's going to be interesting to see which teams those are because the Lucha Brothers are now the ones with the belts. Right. So we're going to be able to find out that, you know what I mean? So the Acclaimed are absolutely, for them, it's like they're experience-wise, like these guys haven't been wrestling that long if you actually look into it. And the places that they have worked are domestic, you know what I mean? And so for them, it's not surprising that they were, I don't want to say unable to keep up with the Lucha Brothers, but they almost weren't speaking the same language from a wrestling standpoint.
Yeah,
and
it's interesting.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see who gels and who doesn't.
Right, absolutely. I think, America, like the country has always been, we talk about the U.S. being a melting pot of different cultures and different races and all these kinds of things. And it's something that as a culture, we've always very much taken pride in. And AEW very much embodies that from a wrestling standpoint, that they bring in lots of different styles, and they don't tell you to change the way you do things just to fit an American audience. They say, we will make the American audience fit you. And certainly, as we can see with the Lucha Brothers, that has absolutely happened, that the American audience has come around. They love what the Lucha Brothers are doing. And so, to other teams that don't have experience working that style, you're kind of throwing them into the fire. Like how many teams like this have the Acclaimed ever faced? I mean, none really, because there's no team like the Lucha Brothers.
None.
So like for the Young Bucks or someone like that, they've fought the Lucha Brothers tons of times. They know what they're doing. But even for FTR, like one of the best teams in the world, they've never faced a team like this. So even for them, it's much different. But I really like that. I would prefer that one or two matches cool. are feel a little disjointed with some weird spots because you have a miscommunication or teams that aren't used to working this style. If what we're going to get on the back end is matches that are so good and so unique in the U.S., I'll take the few weird spots for that.
Sure, and even bigger, if this means the Lucha Brothers can be the Lucha Brothers, and I'll also take that because, I could understand the philosophy of making a team from a different country adjust to what you do stylistically, but one of the problems with WWE from a wrestling standpoint is that their wrestling can get too patterned. If you really are paying attention closely to how every match is structured, it's very similar. No matter, like, there's guys with different styles, but from a match structure standpoint, it's the same for a lot of what they do, and that can get dull. And I think one of the biggest strengths of AEW right now with their deep roster is there's just so much variety from a stylistic standpoint. You can get a match that's totally different from the match right before and after it, and I don't want that to be lost.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you make a really good point, Ibu, about luchadors and how they're treated in American promotions. It amazes me when I will talk to people about Mystico's run as Sin Cara, and people who are just American wrestling fans will be like, yeah, he was terrible. He was the worst. And it's just like, you realize you're talking about one of the greatest luchadors of all time. So somebody would add the biggest main event run, who brought in the most money of any luchador in Mexico. It's like, like if it went wrong, it's not all on him. It can't be all on him. That makes no sense. Yeah. That's like if anybody who was like at the very top suddenly just like, well, they're terrible. Like, no, he's not.
The thing is, if somebody who's special all of a sudden looks pedestrian after you strip him of what makes him special, then that's to be expected. Exactly. I mean, again, I'm not going to go on a different tangent, but like the WWE also, like with Keith Lee got over in the independent scene and then furthermore in NXT being a big man who did preposterous indie shit. And like he goes to the main roster and they try to tell him to work more like a conventional big man and stop doing all that crazy stuff. And it's just like that's a clear you're displaying a clear lack of understanding of what makes him special by doing that. And then when he now all of a sudden looks pedestrian, that's not really on him. You have to understand what makes your talent special and emphasize that rather than de-emphasize that. Well, so I'm glad that in AEW with the Lucha Brothers, like, easily, because so many promotions in the past, they could easily look at the Lucha Brothers and say, oh man, you guys got to slow it down. You guys need to work the way we work. You guys need to calm some of this other stuff down and this and that. And to a degree, I understand it, but you can't fundamentally lose what makes them good. And they have not. So yeah,
absolutely.
Well, I mean, another point about it. Go ahead.
I was just saying really quickly, if you believe Paul Heyman's stories, they tried to do the same thing to Brock Lesnar when he started. So I mean, that's it.
Really?
They will do. Oh yeah. Paul Heyman tells the story that they used to, when Brock Lesnar came out of OVW, he was doing all this insane, like he was moving fast and he was running, and I mean he used to do a shooting star press like usually just normally.
He did.
And Heyman has said that the producers in WWE told him, don't do that. You need to be like a monster. Don't move. Don't take bumps. Don't do anything like that. And Heyman actually interjected and said, no, the fuck, you're not doing that. You're being Brock Lesnar. And then he becomes Brock Lesnar. So there's no limit to what WWE will ask you to do to mesh with their style.
Yeah, man. Wrestling is all about understanding the strengths of your roster and playing to them and emphasizing them. And so ultimately the point here is just let the Lucha Brothers be the Lucha Brothers. And I'm glad that they're allowed to be the Lucha Brothers. Even if that doesn't always breed perfect results. The pluses are much better than the negatives.
Yeah.
Now, but extending on that, let's think about next week. You know, you have exactly. You have these guys who sometimes have difficulties working with the guys who don't speak the same wrestling language as them, and suddenly we've got two guys that we don't know who they are, but they're going to be guys with masks that are very familiar with that style, and who knows what we're going to get next week? It's going to be something to look forward to.
What you're going to get is something that's absolutely physically preposterous and absurd, and it's not going to make any sense, and it's going to break all the rules of wrestling, and for all those reasons it's going to be fucking great.
Well, here's what I mean, that's the Lucha Brothers have left that just in the rear view mirror. I mean, physics is nothing to them.
It's going to be Matrix in a wrestling ring, and I'm here for it.
So what I'm curious about, because it is for the AAA tag titles and not for the AEW tag titles, I wonder if we're going to get more of a lucha style of tag match. I wonder if we're going to get, fewer rules and tags not really being a thing and things like that.
I'll tell you what, Griff. I think so, because if you remember, when they started doing IWGP United States Championship defenses in AEW on Dynamite, they adhered to the rules of New Japan, like the 20-second count out rather than the 10-second.
Right.
And so here, you would think that you would adhere to the rules of this promotion since it's for that belt. And so it'd be kind of interesting if AEW really goes full into this, where it's like you have the Lucha Brothers do kind of a Lucha Libre Open Challenge was for the AAA belts, where they really go fully leaned into that style on TV. And then vice versa, they have great matches in a totally different vein and maybe assimilate a little bit more to a more traditional tag style when they do their AEW championship defenses. I think it'd be an interesting contrast. And if the Lucha Brothers could pull that off and do both simultaneously, and they both are great, I think it'd be just a fantastic notch in their belt. Like if they could just when it comes to them, as a tag team.
Yeah, I'd agree with you on that one. The main event of Rampage, Ricky Starks versus Brian Cage for the FTW title in a Philly street fight. Sergi, this one I think probably divided a lot of opinions, and I want to start by talking about the graph of the match. It's very bold in a street fight to have the babyface spend over half the match with no offense. And you can see from minute 2 to minute 6, Cage had zero offense going the entire time. It's a bold call in a match that's supposed to be as violent as a street fight is supposed to be. And so as a result, it kind of felt like, really for me, for that first 6 minutes, I was like, okay, well, I mean, I'm not really I'm not really involved with it at all. For me, it kind of dragged me out of it. What's interesting, by the way, Chris Jericho did say that Cage, for the first 6 minutes of the match, had almost no offense, and Jericho was absolutely right. So thank you for that, Chris. We appreciate it.
Is Chris Jericho a secret PW Musings correspondent?
All I wanted was for him to just, I was kind of waiting for him to drop, we'll wait for Pro Wrestling Musings to figure that out. So Chris, Pro Wrestling Musings did figure it out, and you were absolutely right. Brian Cage had no offense for like half this match. Sergi, what'd you think about this
That's
one?
hilarious.
Yeah, no, I agree that when Chris Jericho said that, I was immediately like, that absolutely sounds like something we'd say on the podcast. It was fine. I don't know that I agree that that it's necessarily bad to have the babyface absorb a lot of punishment to lead in. I mean, that's a heat sequence. I
meant in a street fight.
It's just weird that the babyface has a physical advantage, and he's the one kind of selling.
That's true.
But that's the thing that we've seen a lot. I don't think it's as effective here as it is, like for instance in Miro versus Darby. But you have to let the smaller guy get some good hits in order to make it believable that it's an even match. But of course, that's not nearly as important in a match where the smaller guy is the heel and has a lot of numbers advantage. So that kind of, it's one of those matches. It's like, well, there's some fun brutality to see in it, but you knew it was going to come down to numbers in the end. So it's kind of like, eh.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say quickly, I liked the fact that they didn't have to distract the ref for Hobbs and Hook to get to get in there, because sometimes they do that, like sometimes without even thinking that when wrestlers are putting the match together, they'll just be like, okay, so we need to do a ref distraction so that the guys can get involved.
Even though you don't need to here.
Right, it's a street fight. They could have been there the whole time. Like I was actually thinking around the 6 minute, I was like, why are these guys not just here the whole time?
Jumping in.
but eventually they did, and they did end up winning the match because of that, so that's fair enough.
Yeah. For me, frankly, it's a weird case where there was nothing wrong with the work in this match from a wrestling standpoint. Wait, am I still here? My screen went kind of blank. Okay, cool. There was nothing wrong with the work from a wrestling standpoint, but I just found myself very much unengaged with this. And I think it's because we had those weeks where, like, Cage was off TV. He might have been hurt. There was some of the Twitter chatter of him kind of complaining about his role a little bit. And it was kind of just weird what was going on there. And I think that period kind of cooled off just any heat that this angle, this storyline really has. And I've been of the belief that if there was anybody that needed Team Taz and the safety net of Team Taz, it's Brian Cage, because he's somebody that I don't know what his prospects are away from Taz as a mouthpiece and the other guys surrounding him. Like I don't know if he has enough individually to be able to just carve out and sustain a viable role for himself in the scheme of AEW, especially with just all the bigwigs who are now in the picture. And I think it was even more apparent here because I'm watching this match, and like Ricky Starks is a guy that I have high hopes for, and I know he's going to be okay because he's a rising star. He has a ton of charisma. He can cut a promo, and he has the Team Taz bag. And he's a guy that he's going to be, even though he's not an AEW pillar, he's in those class of guys, in my opinion, of being, primed and ready for a bigger role sooner rather than later. But Brian Cage, conversely, he's somebody that, I don't think he's quite connected with the audience, and especially not as a baby face. And so it was a bit awkward almost to watch him just kind of do his Brian Cage stuff, which objectively is impressive stuff. But like, it's not like these people were losing their minds for him. And this story just, to me, like I said, it lost some steam. So I wasn't really engaged with this match. And I just didn't really think much of it. And when it was over, and the finishing sequence was good, but when it was over, my thought was more so just like, thank God this is over, and not like, wow, that was like awesome. So my prevailing feelings, I'm just glad it's done, and I kind of want to see what Ricky Starks does from here. So that's kind of my feeling.
I think the best thing for Cage to do right now, if I were him, I think he should take some time off. Either he can go, if he wants to still wrestle, he can go tour, he can go to the indies, do whatever he wants to do. I think he should do that. I think if he's hurt, I think he should heal up, because I think the big thing that he needs right now is just some separation from the fans. And then when he comes back, I think it'll be a bigger deal, because when you hear that, that metal hitting metal sound of his theme, I think you hear that, you realize who's coming, and you realize that, again, like you said, objectively, Brian Cage is an incredible physical specimen. What he can do at his size is amazing to watch. And so I think if he gets some separation, absence makes the heart grow fonder, they always say. And so when he comes back, I think fans will have a little bit more of a better reaction to him when he comes back in that context, as opposed to, trying to build something with this story that I think a lot of people have lost their appetite for at this point. So that's what I would prescribe for him.
Yeah, I mean, I see where Ubo's coming from as far as, not seeing where they're going with in terms of his character. I just feel like when he was with Team Taz, it didn't make sense, because he is too big of a star to be the heater. And it's just, there was no sense of who the star of the team was, where even as much as a prospect as who just had a match with CM Punk? Powerhouse Hobbs, Will Hobbs. Just as much as a prospect as Will Hobbs is, he can fit into the role of a heater, and it was, I've called it before, addition by subtraction. Right. Team Taz makes more sense without Brian Cage. Does Brian Cage have a role as a babyface? I mean, it made sense for him to do a babyface role as a way to separate from Team Taz. What he does now is very much an open question. If I wanted to personally book Brian Cage as a babyface, I would really lean into his connection with Kanyon, and have him talk about Kanyon was my mentor. That's the reason why I do the kind of offense I do. This is I know that the kind of offense I do isn't usual for a guy of my build and my size, and that's because Kanyon was my mentor, and everything I do is a tribute to him. And if you tell that story, that could be a character that people might connect with.
Sure. I definitely, when I saw him on the Kanyon Dark Side, that I did think of that. Like, this could, if they leaned more into his personal connection with his mentor, who had an untimely end, I think it would be a solid basis for a babyface run. So that is a solid pitch.
Yeah. Personally, I like Cage's character right now, actually. So, but yeah, I mean, if people are not into it, then yeah, do what you need to do to get him over. If you do have plans for him, obviously you're absolutely right, Sergi. Hobbs is a good heater, and Ricky Starks is a good heater for the obvious star of Team Taz, who is of course Hook. So I'm glad we're on the same page with that one, that we know who the real we know who the real star of Team Taz really is. Cody Rhodes and Arn Anderson had themselves a segment on Dynamite, and it was
different.
I believe it's called a redneck fire pit that Arn Anderson had set up in Cody's house. And it was weird because it looked like he was outside the house, but then Cody yelled down at him as if he was like in his living room. So I don't know. The whole thing was kind of weird. Sergi, what'd you think about it?
I think he was just yelling down from his balcony at first, and then he came down. I think he was in his yard. But yes, a fire pit, a hobo encampment he seemed to be setting up there with the fire in the old barrel. And it's like, you don't know quite what he's burning until he's burning Cody's clothes. Arn's character is just hilarious lately. I love that they're doing interesting things with Arn now instead of, the coach role was an obvious one for him, but it was pretty boring. And this is fun. And
it is almost unexpectedly just thoroughly entertaining. Like this kind of grumpy Cody grandfather who just slaps the shit out of him until he straightens up is just I don't know what's happening here, but it's like amazing. I'm like, is this leading to a Cody babyface turn? Is this Rock? Am I watching Rocky? Is this kind of I don't know what's going on, but it's like he's burning his clothes and he's talking about shooting people when they break in. It's just I don't know what's happening, but it's kind of great. And I'm like, why is like 65-year-old Arn Anderson one of the top 5 most entertaining things on Dynamite right now? I don't know. It doesn't make sense, but I love it.
What I love is how the memes around Arn Anderson are now canon in AEW. Like he said the line about the Glock on AEW. It became a meme, and now the memes are canon in AEW because Chris Jericho was making jokes about it on commentary on Rampage. That's my favorite part of it. I want to hear more jokes about Arn Anderson, like Glock wielding, like gangster Arn Anderson. I want to hear more about that character.
It's just funny because his son's name rhymes with Glock, and so I need it.
He knew from the beginning.
I need Arn to literally dub himself like his final form Glock Anderson. I need him to be like, you need to find a part of you, Cody. I know that when I get mad, I go from Arn Anderson to Glock Anderson. I need to see where you bring the fire out of you. I need him to refer to himself as Glock Anderson.
All right, Glock and Brock Connection. Okay, so
oh my god,
Glock and Brock Connection.
Okay, you know what? You just convinced me because AEW has done this before. AEW has no qualms having 60-year-old men wrestle. We've seen it with Tully, and we've seen it with Tully, and we've seen it with Sting. I'm convinced. I want Arn to tag with his son now for a match, and I want them to be called the Glock and Brock Connection.
Okay, look, it's not the craziest thing. Arn Anderson can still throw down the best spine buster in the business. He may not be able to do anything else, but his spine buster is still a work of art. It should be in a museum.
He gave Spears a spine buster at All Out 2019, and it was as good as anybody's.
Oh,
so listen, all you have to do is tag in some work punches, do the spine buster, and we're good.
That's all I need.
I believe that he stopped wrestling because he can't take bumps anymore. But
I don't need him to take a bump. Just throw a spine buster. I don't give a damn.
Well, how? Never mind. Anyway,
we're talking about the Glock and Brock Connection.
It might be true.
He took a bump off the apron.
Does anybody remember?
That's right. Totally jumped all over the place.
Technically, he took 2 bumps.
Did y'all remember DDP at the Miami Dynamite in early 2020? He had a wrestling match, and he didn't bump either. That's
true.
Yeah,
that was definitely a case of a protected guy coming back for a very minor in a tag match.
Yeah, exactly.
The one thing I'm iffy about on this is he's burning Cody's clothes, and I love Cody's clothes. I do not want Cody to go down a road of I'm wearing athletic gear now. I don't wear suits anymore because because Arn thinks I'm too fancy. Because I love his suits, but we'll see. Yeah. We'll see what happens.
All right, fair enough. It seems like Cody is moving on, at least for the moment, from his feud with Malakai Black, and that leaves Malakai out to do something else. And on Dynamite, we found out exactly what that something else was. Dante Martin got himself a promo, all 45 seconds of it, on Dynamite before Malakai turned the lights out and then turned Dante Martin's lights out. This, to me, as soon as I saw it, I was like, I don't really care what the story is. I want to see this. I want to see this match. I want to see Malakai versus Dante. And really, I want to see a Dante Martin babyface comeback in a singles context, because he's done it as a hot tag. But when you do it as a singles wrestler, it looks different than a hot tag does. And I really want to see what he can do in that regard. And I think Malakai Black is the perfect guy for him. And I mean, I think we all know where this is going. I mean, obviously, I think Malakai is going to kick his head off, and that's okay. It's all right sometimes if you can predict the end of a story, as long as the way we get there is entertaining. And I think there's no doubt that what Dante Martin can do certainly will be. So, Ibu, what do you think about this? And how do you feel about Dante versus Malakai?
I tweeted this, but so if I remember correctly, like he shows up, it goes black, and then like Dante's like out of the ring. I thought that Malakai Black became the Undertaker and just like sent him to a different dimension. And I was getting ready to type up some lore to break down the lore here. But then it felt like Tony Khan wanted to kill all the fanfics in the moment, because like, again, Dante's out of the ring, right? I'm like, oh my god, he's in the black dimension. And then the camera pans out and he's black. Like, but then the camera pans out to show he's just out of the ring, and I'm like, oh man, I wanted a fanfic. But listen, Malakai Black is one of the coolest guys in AEW. Dante Martin is a spectacular athlete. I actually thought the promo he was cutting before he got sent to the black dimension was pretty solid. I thought that it was better than I expected, actually. I thought he was, to be honest, I thought he was going to sound like shit, and he didn't. And so, yeah, man, Dante Martin is awesome. I think this is a match that, here's the weird thing with Malakai. I think that some of his matches after the Cody squash went too long in a way that kind of like doesn't really make much narrative sense. And in my opinion, I think it would be so effective on a storytelling level if he continued to squash the guys like a Lee Johnson and a Dustin Rhodes, so that if this match went longer and Dante got more in, it would be effective storytelling. And it would go a long way for showcasing and presenting Dante as a big deal. Right. But if he does kind of go 7-8 minutes with him, it's no real different than when Dustin did it. But nonetheless, if this match gets even just a decent amount of time, like a 7-8 minutes, it's going to be a terrific sprint. So I'm very much looking forward to this, probably more than any other match on Dynamite so far. So yeah.
Sergi, how are you feeling about this one?
Oh yeah, I agree completely. It should be really fantastic. I think that one thing to really keep in mind with this match is that up until now, Malakai has been up against the Nightmare family, and the thing that's important about that is that the Nightmare family was poised to fall. I mean, it's impressive that one man took out this huge and seemingly powerful faction, but it was a very hollowed out faction. All right. Of the problems in the Nightmare family were already there and just waiting for someone to push them over. You do not have that with Dante Martin. Dante Martin is genuinely, as far as we've seen, is just genuinely this really earnest young man out to compete and prove how good he is in legitimate and just straightforward competition. There aren't any hidden weaknesses there for Malakai to push on. There's nothing for him to corrupt, and it's going to be interesting to see if that affects the storytelling.
Yeah, it's a good point that you make, and the thing about Dante is he still the youngest wrestler in AEW? I know he was at one point. I don't know if he still is, but I'm gonna assume he still is. And so it's such a different dynamic for Malakai, because he does go from fighting the Nightmare family, who not only as a faction was starting to break down, but they, with the exception of Lee Johnson, they are older, they are established already, and for a lot of them, they've done what they're going to do in AEW. They've had big matches. They've, in Cody's case, they've held titles. And so dealing with Dante, who is a rising star, so much so that, we talk about guys like Hangman or Ricky Starks that are kind of above the cutoff of the young pillars, like they're established now. And then we talk the 4 young pillars. Well, Dante Martin is on the other side of that. Like he's rising, beneath those young pillars. And so for Malakai to go from the established guy to now the rising star is going to be a very interesting dynamic. But at the end of the day, they gave me enough story that I care enough about the match. But really, physically, what these two are capable of doing is what I'm really looking forward to. And the juxtaposition between Malakai's MMA style and Dante Martin's just incredible athleticism, that is really what I'm looking forward to.
Mm-hmm.
Let's end the day talking about CM Punk, and he has his 3rd match in AEW, this time with Daniel Garcia. What a year it's been for Daniel Garcia, by the way. I mean, this guy has been everywhere. He has fought everybody. This guy is, he might be, talk about a rising star in wrestling. I think
Rookie
he's only 23.
Of the year.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think he's 23 years old. Is that right? I think I saw that
I want to say he's 23, yeah.
Yeah. So
Not only what a year, but what a week. I mean, this week, just like,
Minoru
wow.
Suzuki, Alex Shelley, CM Punk, like, holy crap.
That's unbelievable. I mean, you talk about some of the greats.
Fun fact, I was watching Alex Shelley versus Garcia at the beginning of this podcast. I literally watched it as we were talking and multitasking, and I gave my star rating on Twitter. So there you go.
All right, that's a peek behind the curtain.
There you go. Let me break kayfabe here.
I want to say. I want to go to Sergi here because I want to save my thoughts. But Sergi, I know that you are a really big fan of this style of match, what they gave us here. So from the perspective of someone who really likes this more technical style, really likes these singles matches, like you said.
This is actually my favorite type of working style as well when it comes to wrestling.
Yeah, okay, so I'm glad to hear then from both of you because it's I come from a different perspective on this, so I'm excited to hear from you guys. So we'll start with Sergi. Take us through this match from your perspective. What did you like about it? What did you dislike about it, if anything? And how should we feel about it?
Well, to me, the thing about this match is that as CM Punk goes along, we're seeing new sides of what he has to offer because we've only seen a couple of matches of his. When he had his match against Will Hobbs, my thought was that he was using more strikes because he was up against a bigger guy. And he brought in more strikes. Now, after having seen this match and looking at the stats for this match, I'm realizing actually the Darby Allin match was an outlier in that he didn't use a lot of strikes. Possibly it wasn't really so much about the size of his opponent than about the alignment. As a babyface versus babyface respect match, that's why he wasn't using as many strikes. He didn't want to portray a lot of animosity. It was much more hold for hold. And that's what we're seeing here. A lot of it was a very similar, in many ways, kind of match to Darby Allin's match, in the sense of a very similar type of opponent with a similar size and a set of moveset, but a very different aspect of it, that the Darby Allin match was a very respect-based match, and this was a very personal animosity match of, you came in and you screwed with me, and you're going to find out. You fooled around, and now you're going to find out. That was the story of the match, and it was really well told, of a guy who wanted to become famous off of someone's name, off of a famous person's name, and finding out just how much he bit off, but also seeing how great and how much potential that young man has, despite that.
Yeah. For me, Griff, I find CM Punk's AEW matches to be just thoroughly fascinating because, Punk, if you know anything about him or listen to his interviews, he has a very much an old school mentality to how he approaches wrestling. And what I found fascinating is that he's deliberately taking a different approach to every match he's had so far. And it just makes for interesting viewing because he's a guy that he brings a lot of little things to his matches, and they add up to making the match better. I'm watching this, and the intrigue going in is just what approach is CM Punk taking to this Garcia match, and what is he going to break out? Because again, part of being more of an old soul for Phil is that he's not a get my shit in guy. So you're going to see CM Punk moves in this match that you didn't see in the previous match, but you're going to see moves that were in in the previous match that won't be in this one. And so it's interesting what combinations he has and what he chooses to unleash and not unleash. I also find it fascinating because CM Punk in interviews has said that he's not a guy who is going to practice his match or his moves, and that he's going to almost relearn how to wrestle on the fly naturally by wrestling. And he said that the approach is like riding a bike, and it's that's a very tricky approach to take because technically it's like, what if you look bad, or what if you do this, or what if you do that? But I think it makes it super compelling and interesting that he's basically rediscovering himself on the fly, and it's also a massive flex that he's doing so, and his matches are good. That he's kind of, like you said, he's riding a bike before your eyes, and it's like he's calling these matches on the fly, and it's so fascinating to see how much veteran savvy he just has and his wrestling IQ, because this is a guy who hasn't wrestled for 7 years, right? And he's just in there, and it's so clear how natural just his instincts are when it comes to formulating a functioning match. And to me, CM Punk to this day has such a mastery of structure. He's not all the way there yet as a super worker. So he's not 2011 to 2013 best in the world CM Punk who's going to give you a near 5-star match on a pay-per-view. But what you have here is veteran Phil Brooks, who still gets wrestling and still understands wrestling. And he's going to wrestle this kid and give you a match that makes sense, and it's going to build. And for this one, I just found it so interesting to see his approach. He's still such a technical, he's still so technically sound. Like I said, he did the slow build approach of kind of doing the feel out and the technical stuff, and even just the little things like Garcia taking him to the corner and giving him a hard chop, showing the defiance, being that hard-nosed kid. He gives him the fuck you chop and yells in his face, and then CM Punk he gives him the fuck off kid slap. Like, he just slaps him and tells him to get away from him. It was amazing. Or Punk busting out a Pepsi twist, and it's like, okay, we're back in Ring of Honor. And Punk his legs are getting worked on, and so he can't do the GTS because his legs are hurt, and he can't jump off the top rope, but he can give you an Anaconda Vice. I just find Punk's matches to be very interesting again. And I think this could be argued as his best AEW match. I really, really enjoyed this, and I said this on Twitter. I think he's about 6 more singles outings away from being like really, really fully formed and back like on the groove and ready to have like big time matches with the big stars of AEW. But I really appreciated this for what it was, and the other one more thing I would say is that Punk also has said that he's emulating Bret Hart's approach to wrestling right now, and you could see it. You could very much see it because like the thing with Punk and the thing with AEW as a whole is like the fan base in AEW is they're just well educated and they understand wrestling, and so they're able to appreciate different styles. Like in past eras and generations of wrestling, fans maybe are only receptive to one way of doing things and maybe not receptive to another way. But with AEW fans, you can see that they're appreciative of just great wrestling, no matter how it's really done, as long as it's done well. right?
Yeah.
And I think with CM Punk, he's never going to be a Ray Phoenix, right? He's never going to be this hyper athletic, crazy, just whatever. That never was his game. His game was that he was super sound and had great wrestling IQ and he had great timing and he was a really good storyteller. And I think with Punk, you're already seeing just bits and pieces of that. And like I said, he's 6 to 7, I think, matches away from really being truly back. And I think when he is back, he'll be able to claim justifiably in his own way and be able to back it up that, again, in his own way, he is the best in the world. And so that's kind of how I'm feeling about it.
Yeah, that's fair. The issue, you mentioned his legs getting worked on. I actually did have an issue with that because he started selling that, but he then goes on to hit a flying cross and a springboard, and it's like, I'm not someone who says if your leg's being worked on, you're not allowed to do any top rope moves, because I think that can be an effective storytelling device to have someone fighting through the pain. It's the fact that this is CM Punk's first springboard in AEW, and he does it after he's gone to such great length to tell us how in pain he is because of his legs. I didn't really love.
From what I remember. Oh, go ahead. Finish your thing. Sorry.
Well, I was gonna say is that that's just me. That's a personal thing. So if that worked for some people from a storytelling perspective, then that's totally fine. But I'm certainly not going to argue with you that CM Punk's his strength is not as a physical wrestler. His strength is as a storyteller, as someone who mentally understands pro wrestling. That has always been CM Punk's strength, going all the way back to Ring of Honor. It's one of the reasons why he was such a breath of fresh air in Ring of Honor, because that is such a work rate heavy company, and it's so much about like the technical side of wrestling and all that. And CM Punk comes in and he actually gives people a character that they can really get behind. And so I mean, he's certainly not a bad wrestler by any stretch of the imagination.
No, not at all.
But yeah, from a physical standpoint, I think he tells simple stories. They're effective stories, and you can see it specifically. Like we're looking right now at the cumulative flow of offense. You're talking minute by minute. Look, this is pretty simple. CM Punk starts on top. Daniel Garcia gets the upper hand rather. He works his leg, and then CM Punk makes his comeback, and he ends up winning. Simple story. It works. So for me, I really like high work rate. I really love high spots. So for me, I will take a Ray Phoenix. I will take a Dante Martin, just from a wrestling match perspective over CM Punk. But that doesn't mean that I can't appreciate what CM Punk does in his matches, and I certainly do.
Yeah, I definitely. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, sorry, it's fine. I know you've been waiting, but I could understand that perspective. For me, regarding the selling thing, I mean, I got to go back, but I'm pretty sure Punk was like limping towards the end of the match in between spots. But yeah, again, like that's the thing. That's the thing. Like, some people, will personally prefer the guy who's more, just fantastic and dazzling from an athletic standpoint. But I guess for me, the reason why I just enjoy Punk so much, especially in this AEW setting, is, again, there's so much variety, and he provides another different contrast that really starkly stands out. Because I don't want to say it this way, because I don't want to take away from anybody, but I think high flying and athleticism in wrestling now is so abundant that it's borderline passe. I guess is the way I almost want to say it, and so yeah, sure, and because of that, a moonsault or a tope is almost ho-hum at this point to me. Everybody does it. Everybody can do it. Everybody's an athletic freak now. But having this almost Terry Funk-like figure on the AEW roster, this grizzled, gray-bearded CM Punk, who is just there with his taped fists and his ugly long boys gear, just taking Daniel Garcia to the mat and forcing this kid to work at his. I just find it so interesting, and it's why I wouldn't say it was the best AEW match of the week. It's probably the third best, but it was my favorite of the week. I just find myself it's like when you're watching a speaker. Well, Punk is a guy that you hang on. For me, I hang on every word he says. But even in the ring, especially now, because he contrasts so much, I'm almost hanging on every minute of the match, like in a totally different way. I just find him very uh, captivating. I guess it's just interesting. It's just interesting to see this guy work himself back into wrestling shape, like before my eyes. But go ahead, Sergi.
Yeah, you know what? Like 99% of what Ibu was saying is I'm completely on his side with that. CM Punk is, for me, the star of the show right now, with the only possible exception being like Adam Page or Kenny Omega. He is the top guy. Danielson to some extent. But, I mean, there's an amazing compellingness that he has. And unlike those other guys, he has it regardless of who he's fighting. It's not. He doesn't have to be in a big story for what he's doing is a big story because he's doing it. Period. There's no. There's no. That's it. That's all that's necessary. Now, and also to expand on what you were saying about his reluctance to pre-work a match, and part of that is certainly that he doesn't want it to feel over-rehearsed. But another part of that is that he's very aware of his bump card. And the fact that he makes everything he does special because you're only getting so much of it. That there is a time limit on this. There's only so much that he has left to give, and every bit of it's special. And that's amazing for me. Now, I definitely don't agree with what you said about that that he's building up to a great match. I think he started with, like, he's building up to being on the level where he's going to be working with the top stars in AEW. His first match was with one of the top stars in AEW. Darby Allin counts as one of the top stars of AEW. Sure. For me, this match was definitely fantastic, but I don't think that I don't think that it blows the other two matches, especially the first one, out of the park. I think that his
it's comparable to the Darby match for sure.
Yeah, exactly. I think that his debut match had many things to offer that were unique and amazing. And I think that, like, Gareth did his tail of the tape over that match and showed a lot of the really interesting thought that he put into it. And there's a lot to unpack there with that match. It was a great match. But this was also a great match, and I agree with you. For me, it was my favorite match of the week as well, just because I'm just a huge CM Punk mark, and I loved what he's doing. This is a great example of the kind of things that I want to see from him, and can't wait to see. Oh, and next week he has a match with a high flyer. At Side Out. Yeah, that's going to be something else. Every match he matches up against someone who brings something new to the table. And that by itself is the story. And I'm just really looking forward to it.
It's so interesting because, again, like, going into every one of these, the interest going in for me is just what approach is he going to take? And, Punk literally, like, a day or two ago said that, like, he right now is just flexing his artistic freedom, and he called what he's doing right now just art. Like, he said he's an artist. And what I'm fascinated with here is, without being cliche, like, what kind of picture does he paint with Seidel? Because it's like, CM Punk, in one of his recent interviews, said that, like, I could do some of the new stuff that these modern high-flying wrestlers are doing. Like, he said anyone could really do it, but Punk said that if I do it, it's going to look like shit compared to what some of these kids like a Phoenix are doing. I'm sure CM Punk could pull off a 450 splash, but it'll probably be a sloppy 42-year-old man 450 compared to an AJ Styles, even though AJ is like 43. But you get my point. And so I guess what I'm saying is, it's interesting. Is Punk going to try next week to say, all right, let me do what the cool kids are doing? Or is Punk going to play spoiler and Mr. Slowdown on Seidel? And so just that intrigue of not really knowing what the match is going to look like is one of my favorite things about CM Punk's run so far. Because there's so many wrestlers that you know what they're going to bring to every match because they bring everything to every match. They do everything every time at every point. And so, well, Punk, because he doesn't have that mindset or approach, it leads you with so many questions going into it. And so far, at least, each result has been, if nothing else, very interesting, and it leaves you with a lot to think about and unpack, like you said, after the match. I spoke briefly to Gareth and Michael Sidgwick on Twitter because Sidgwick compared him to Brett in that Punk doesn't have a bunch of conventional 5-star classics under his belt the way maybe some other GOAT tier wrestlers do. But comparing him to Bret Hart, where that Bret Hart's another guy that, Bret does have a couple all-timers, but that's not why he's in the category or status of legend, is because of it's because of his craft. And Bret has a lot of these, not to be a star rating nerd, but he has a lot of these 3 3/4 to 4 1/4 star level matches where they're so different from each other from a match to match basis. And when you analyze and break down what he's doing from a craftsmanship level, there's just a lot of little details that make them fascinating in how they create their own unique stories within these matches. And CM Punk is very much the same way, where he's having these aren't all-timers in AEW, but they're very good matches that are unique from a craftsmanship standpoint. And I don't think the Seidel thing is going to be any different.
It's really interesting. It's a really interesting look.
Yeah. When it comes to the Bret Hart comparison, I think that's something that's going to make me go back and watch more Bret Hart matches, just to get a better appreciation. Because Bret Hart has always been to me someone that I've always been only really that interested in his match if I was really interested in his opponent, whether that be Owen or Hakushi or someone that really, that really excites me. But just seeing the comparison that they made between the arm drag and then giving the bemused reaction to being arm drag, that comparison of the spots between the match with 1-2-3 Kid and the match with Darby Allin, it just really gave me a new perspective for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Exactly.
See, the interesting thing for me with the Bret Hart comparisons is I'm a really big Bret Hart fan, but the reason why I think it is really because of his persona. I think that's what drew me in. Like these two guys fight a similar style, but what I loved about Bret Hart was that was his whole deal, and he was the hitman, and he had the glasses, his move, he had the sharpshooter, and like all of this stuff that all of it was designed to make you fear Bret Hart when he stepped into the ring. And I really, really like that. I love the idea that people should be scared of what Bret Hart can do to them. And so that's why for me, I'm a huge fan of Bret, and for Punk, just solely from a physical storytelling perspective, it doesn't hit me the same way because his character is not quite that. That doesn't mean that I'm not invested in his character at all. I certainly am. I love his promos, and like you said, Ibu, I'm with him. Like, I'm hanging on every word when he talks. But just from a physical standpoint, it doesn't work the same for me because he's not presented as the hitman. That to me, it personifies what Bret Hart was about.
Yeah, he's not this stone cold submission expert whose whole gimmick is that he's pinpoint accurate with all his moves and he's going to tap you out.
Sure. That's what appealed to me about Bret Hart.
If anything, a Danielson is closer to that than a Punk. But I guess the comparison is just in their approach of how they formulate a wrestling match.
Yeah, so. It's an apt comparison. But yeah, for me, I think there are people out there that, like me, really like high spot matches. I mean, and again, like you said, AEW fans are very intelligent, so it's not like, those of us who really like high spots and athleticism and things like that. It's not like we can't appreciate what CM Punk is. Yeah. Exactly, and that's certainly not what's going on. But I think the Bret Hart comparison, I agree with you. Even if it's not the perfect comparison from a character standpoint or from a physical standpoint, from an approach standpoint, I think it's an apt comparison.
Definitely.
Well, folks, I want to thank you for making it all the way through the Pro Wrestling Musings podcast. If you have, lots of stuff to talk about, as always. We keep saying every week that we're going to go shorter, but there's always new stuff to talk about. So and we can only do it because we have the numbers that we have. So big thank you to Craig from PWM who's putting all this together, the Lord of Stats himself, who puts all of this together for us every week. So we want to thank him for that. Lots of stuff going on next week, but before we can even get there, we of course have to tell everyone where they can find everyone. So Ibu, if you would please tell people where they can find you.
Well, guys, I thank you so much for listening to this podcast. You can find me on OnlyFans, where I can you can.
Sergi got intrigued.
He's like, wait a minute, hold on now. Hold on. I'm on OnlyFans breaking down CM Punk matches. You can find me on Twitter at Backup Hangman. That is BACK UPHA. You can spell Hangman. I don't got to spell the whole thing. Backup Hangman at Twitter.com. I tweet about professional wrestling. I'm a goddamn mark, and I will just tweet things, and I hope you enjoy them. Thank you. Find me on there, and you can find me on this podcast periodically. I thank you for listening.
That's what we love about you, being a mark on Twitter. By the way, don't search Hangman Adam Pierce on OnlyFans. You'll find some weird stuff. Don't.
Probably.
Well, possibly. It was really awesome. It was really awesome meeting you, Ibu. I hope you're on more often.
This is great. I hope so too, man. I hope so too. This is great. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, my name is Sergi Alderman. I have an unusual enough name that my Twitter handle is just my name, and it can be found below, I'm sure. I tweet about wrestling a lot. My thing is the Styles Make Fights series of columns, where I use a workbook that I created based on Craig's stats to compare the historical the rates of offense from a percentile basis, and using that to preview and then post-mortem dissect the matches in AEW each week. So check that out. It is fun. Those who read it tell me that they really look forward to it every week. And
it's great stuff.
If you do read it, please give me feedback. That's the thing. I got readers, but I don't get. I want these columns to start conversations, and so far that hasn't happened. And I'd like, if you've got any kind of commentary or question about any of my columns, I'd love to hear from you. You can there's a comment box at the bottom on the Pro Wrestling Musings website, and that's where you'll find the columns. But I also will send you put out on my Twitter a link to it every time I put one out, and you can also tweet any question to me or any comment about my columns, and that's what I do in wrestling.
Well, you always hear me every week say to go read that. Yes,
please do, Ibu.
Yeah, I just completely forgot. Yeah, listen, people, man, just check out the PW Musings site, man. It's great. There's tons of articles. We have a wonderful staff that just puts a lot of hard work into this, like Sergi and everybody else. You can find me every so often on the Dynamite Roundtable when I'm not working. And listen, man, this analytics wave, it's coming. The numbers don't lie. You know, people are taking notice. Mr. Tiger Style Lee Moriarty, you know, he's a fan of PW Music. Mr. Meltzer cited us in the middle of an argument.
That's right.
Hey, I was very happy to see that Daniel Garcia put a like on my analysis or my preview of his CM Punk match. I was just like, oh my gosh, Senpai noticed me.
Yeah, exactly. Listen, yeah. I'm telling you, people, we're coming.
You're absolutely right. That analytics wave, it's hitting wrestling just like it's hitting everything else. So PWM on the cutting edge. I have been Griff from GA. You can check me on my personal YouTube channel, General Admission Wrestling. While you're there, if you're not already, subscribe to the Pro Wrestling Musings YouTube channel. We got all kinds of cool stuff dealing with the incoming analytics wave that we are at the crest of. But look, if you don't like watching videos, then you probably like reading articles, so it means you'll like Styles Make Fights. You hear me say it every week that Sergi's on. Go read Styles Make Fights. It's excellent. It's one of the most unique looks at some of these at these singles matches that you will ever see. So go check that out. But until then, enjoy the rest of your weekend. Enjoy football like I'm about to. And enjoy AEW coming this week. Special Saturday edition of Dynamite, I think, is this week. So it'll be interesting. There will be lots of wrestling in a 48-hour period. So lots for us to do and lots for us to talk about on the Pro Wrestling Musings podcast. Subscribe, give us a 5-star review on Spotify, Apple, wherever you listen to podcasts. We will talk to you next week about all things AEW. We appreciate you.